Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC on ESPN 58, Perez versus Taira, also known as UFC Vegas 93. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as usual, is Keith Shillan, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, my man. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well myself. Kind of a lazy, quiet Sunday here. We're
all right.
4 hours ago, we talked about UFC Louisville, and we're just circling right back around to talk about these 13 fights. The UFC is back at the Apex. A lot of fighters on this card are very familiar with that place because a bunch of them came from the Contender Series. Give me your general thoughts on this one. Obviously, the UFC, this is kind of the time between, because there was UFC 302, which they did some loading up of. UFC 303 is coming down the pike, where they're trying to get stuff onto the Conor versus Chandler card. Knock on wood that happens. So we end up with some weird cards in between. Tell me something good, something bad about this one.
Yeah. Before I forget, so by the time people actually watch this show, should be the 10th of June. So I want to give a shout out to my wife, who it is our anniversary today. So thank her for all she does. It's not right now as we're taping, but by the time people watch this tomorrow morning, it'll be our anniversary. So thank you for the only person that I love more than Bo Nickal, my wife. And before people come at me and be like, Keith, you got 3 kids. Yeah, I do, but like they can win some NCAA championships if they want to get into the Bo Nickal level, As far as this card, wow, this is like your shed, like where you just got a bunch of junk in it and you keep saying you want to like clean it out and organize. Like I have this, like in my shed, I walk in and this little, I don't know, contraction that holds like rakes and we all have them, rakes and shovels and
the tetanus box. Because rusty,
But I have to like reorganize it like 4 times a year because I start getting lazy and it's overpacked and then it gets moved around. That's what I feel like this card is. It's just, they just threw every junk they can on this little thing.
You're rummaging through it. You're like, ugh, what the hell is Jimmy Flick still doing in here?
Yeah, Jimmy Flick. What Jimmy Flick is it's my tamper that I got at a yard sale where the handle is rotted. So if I pick it up really high, the handle will come completely off the tamper. But if I get it in, I only kind of like half tamp, then it still works pretty good. That's kind of my situation. Like why don't I just buy a new tamper? Like why am I still holding on to this wooden rotten handle tamper? That's Jimmy Flick.
And actually, you come up with a pretty good metaphor for this card because talking about tools that you bought for some job a while ago and now you just need them so seldom you barely remember when you got them because it's a fact of life in the modern UFC where they run 42, 43 cards a year that you have a lot of fighters who come in on short notice. And the conventional wisdom is, of course, you take that fight because even if you lose, you've done the UFC a solid. You're going to get probably at least 2 more fights, definitely at least 1 more. Well, all those fighters who step up on short notice and are owed fights by the UFC, there are a lot of them on this card. There are a lot of fighters on this card who lost on the Contender Series or won and weren't signed, and they stepped up on short notice later, and they're getting the additional fights the UFC quote unquote owes them. There are a lot of them on this card. So I'm sure Sean Shelby and Mick Maynard are in the shed like, oh man, remember when we bought that thing? Or, good things I'll say about this card. If you're going to have leftovers night, if you're going to have the rusty rake pile in the shed, at least there's only 1 fight above welterweight. Well, hell, there's only 2 fights above 145 pounds. There's a welterweight fight and a middleweight fight. And speaking strictly for myself, if I got to watch 2 people fight that probably aren't UFC material or probably aren't long for the UFC, maybe they aren't there yet, maybe they never will be, maybe they're just not that skilled, I would much rather they be 135 pounders than
Oh
heavyweight.
yeah. So when I get excited for a card, this kind of like how I rank cards, and if I have to give like a letter grade, I go like a D plus. Like it checks one box to me. It's kind of like three boxes. The first box is action. Like how good is the action going to be? And some people, that's it. That's the only box they care about.
Sure.
And I understand that. And that's cool. But that's like the first box. And when you have the three flyweight fights, the three men flyweight fights are absolute like great matchups. So that checks that box. But then the other two boxes aren't really checked. Like the next box is divisional relevance. Like I want fights that, the winner is going to move closer to a title shot, and we're talking about matchmaking them. And then the third box is like storylines. I want a little backstory. This doesn't have those last two boxes.
That's a good point. In terms of who's closest to a title shot here, obviously Alex Perez is the one who has been closest, but if he hadn't beaten Matheus Nicolau on short notice a couple months ago, he probably would have been cut. Like he's not close to a title shot. He was closer to the cut list than he was to a title shot. So I agree. And the only problem is that, there are three sensational flyweight fights on this card, but there are actually four flyweight fights. The other one we'll get to when we get to it. But
no, is that Jimmy Fleck?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that one.
But interestingly, obviously this was going to be Alex Perez versus Tagir Ulanbekov. That was a sensational matchup. Ulanbekov is a guy that he seems like he's cruising towards the title picture. They took the Tatsuro Taira versus Josh Van fight that was supposed to happen at UFC 302. They pushed it to this card and they split it off into two separate fights. Now we have Perez versus Taira as the headliner. We have Ulanbekov versus Van as the top prelim. I think it's the top prelim. I like that. I like that they took the two hot prospects away from each other and matched one of them up against a serious rising contender now, Ulanbekov, and they matched the other up against Perez, who is a longtime contender who the jury is still kind of out on where he is. Like, I think it's better for the division.
Well, I feel like Ulanbekov fits the same category as the other two, though.
You think Ulanbekov takes a little step back because of his last performance?
No. But I mean, like he's like a younger, newer guy. Hasn't really reached the top of the division, but has that excitement. Where like Perez, he's that veteran. Like I view Ulanbekov as the same way I lose Taira and Van. Like the guy's on the rise.
I think
great. I thought his last performance was good.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think for me, it's that Ulanbekov has been in the UFC a little longer and he's a little older, but he has the same number of fights in the UFC as Taira does. So that's actually a really good point.
Yeah,
like they both have 5 fights in the UFC.
He's 32, right, which is way older than I thought.
Yeah, like Taira and Van are in their early 20s, but that's age, not fight age. So in terms of development, you might actually be right.
Yeah.
And then the only reason we won't have like a 7-person cut list at the end of this thing is that there are so many fighters that are debuting or just have one fight in the UFC. Yeah. But if you were to ask me, of the 26 fighters on this card, how many will still be in the UFC 18 months from now, half of them might be gone. Yeah, there are a lot of matchups on this card between people who are under 500 in the UFC. And hey, that's the circle of life. If the UFC is going to run 10 episodes of the Contender Series every year and sign on average about 50 fighters a season,
every one of them
50 have got to go.
Sign the winners, the losers, the cornerman, everybody. I think we've talked about this before. I think it should be one person episode. I think that'd be the most exciting.
That was what was so cool about the first 2 seasons was like there was the drama. They were actually sitting there like they were nervous. Like people that got in were in tears. People that didn't get in were in tears. Or, that like there was a disappointment when Dana said, "You did great. I want you to come back and fight again." It was really interesting, dramatic TV the first 2 seasons, and now it's really just prelims on Tuesday. Any other general thoughts on this card before we dig into the prelims?
No, let's go.
First up on the UFC on ESPN 58 prelims is a featherweight matchup between Melquizael Costa and Nuerdanbieke Shayilan. Costa, the 27-year-old Brazilian, is 20-7 overall. He's 1-2 in the UFC. Made his debut on short notice and got throttled by Thiago Moises. Since then, he has a decision win over Austin Lingo, and in his most recent appearance, back in December, got knocked out early in the second round by Steve Garcia. He will look to get back in the win column here against Shayilan. 30-year-old from China is 39-11. He is 3-2 in the UFC. He lost his last time out. Incidentally, also lost to Steve Garcia. He got, incidentally, also knocked out early in the second round. Prior to that, he had been on a nice little 3-fight win streak over Sean Soriano, TJ Brown, and Derek Minner. He's looking to start up a new win streak. He is moderately favored to do so. Oh, pause. He's looking to start up a new win streak. He is not favored to do so, as Costa is minus 175 or so. Shayilan plus 140 on the comeback. I read off that line wrong, I think, because it still doesn't fit in my head. I was a little surprised to see Costa the kind of favorite he is, because, I mean, he's a fun story. I mean, he got signed on short notice, a real tough challenge in Thiago Moises. It was really great to see him get a win in the UFC. Obviously, he has an unforgettable visual trademark. Like, you know, he has vitiligo, where he's skinned with like no melanin and he dyes his hair to match it sometimes. But in terms of skills, he's a pretty good sized athletic fighter who, at least at lightweight, just mostly seemed to be a kind of power punching slugger. And he didn't have much for people that could avoid that, you know, or withstand it and then take advantage of the rest of his game. Here, like, he's going to probably be bigger and have greater reach on Shayilan. I'm sure he's going to have the advantage in one-shot power, but I favor Shayilan. Like, Shayilan has already kind of told us who he is. He's not that old. I think he's like 32, 33. No, okay, he's only 30, but he already has like 1 million fights. He had 1 million fights in China in like WLF. And thus far, he is lost to the good featherweights and he's beaten the kind of middling ones. And the guys that he's beaten aren't terrible. Like Sean Soriano, TJ Brown, Derek Minner, they're, you know, none of them are great, but they're not complete slouches either. I just expect that Shayilan will be able to. I don't think he's going to hang out in Costa's preferred striking range. I think he'll crowd him. I think he'll shove him to the cage, try to wrestle him if he needs to. If he gets hit cleanly, I mean, that's not great, but I don't think he's just going to wilt. Yeah, I kind of favor Shayilan in this one. He's aggressive, but he's not like silly. He is experienced. He is kind of cagey. Give me Shayilan to win 2 rounds out of 3 in a little bit of a nail biter, but just never really let Costa be comfortable. Like, I look for him to, you know, collapse the pocket, try to get all the way in and not let Costa hit him with big haymakers and kicks at range. Maybe try to take him down a few times, whether he succeeds or not, just to kind of shake up Costa's rhythm, keep him uncomfortable. But yeah, I like Shayilan by decision here in the mild upset right out of the gate.
Look at you. All right. Starting right off with an upset. Love it. This is what it is. Like, I don't think either guy is that good, but I don't think either guy's that bad either. But like this is the ceiling. Like, they're prelims guys. The issue with Shayilan is he's not a great athlete. And I always go back to the Josh Kulabau fight where he made Josh Kulabau look quick. You know, he's he should. I mean, Kulabau, I think we both agree, is much better than he looks. Shillan is a short, stocky guy, very strong. I mean, the guy's ripped. He has power, and he knows it. He fights that way. He throws like a lot of overhands, trying to, knock his opponent out with one shot. He will wrestle, but he doesn't really set up his takedowns very well. He'll just kind of shoot. He did get takedowns against TJ Brown, a fight that I bring up. He was relentless to get that fight to the ground, which I like that. He also showed some, good hip control to not be taken down when Brown was trying to take him down. When he's on top, he's it seems like he's not natural at keeping a guy down. He struggles to keep the fight to the canvas. He does have a bunch of subs on his record. Like he'll rush for subs, but you have to worry about his durability. I mean, the guy just got TKO'd with a body shot against Steve Garcia. Garcia is, it's not to become a real fan favorite though. Costa, I think he's a little more smooth. He's a southpaw. He can fight at both stances. I think he's a pretty good technical striker. He's got a good jab. He follows up with a lot of combinations. He has some power. I love this kicking game against Arsalingo. Again, it's against Arsalingo, but he's battering the body, especially from the orthodox stance. I like that he throws a lot of teep kicks. Like he was destroying Lingo with body kicks. Step in knees, I like. He'll toss out some spinning attacks. I think he's an underrated wrestler. I definitely think Shayilan is the better wrestler, but Costa will sneak in a takedown, but he's a bad defensive wrestler. If he's on top, I like his ground and pound. He's got some good back takes. He has a submission threat, though he was submitted by Thiago Moises. You got to be worried about his chin though. He was just knocked. Who just knocked him out?
Steve Garcia knocked both of them out.
He knocked both of them out. Okay, all right. I had Garcia, and I'm like, oh my god, did I mess up my notes? Okay. I'm gonna go the opposite. I'm gonna go with Costa. I think he might be. I definitely think he's better than Nuerdanbieke on the feet, other than maybe the power. But I think he can move. I think he's faster. And you know what? I said Nuerdanbieke is a better wrestler, but I don't think there's like a huge advantage. Like Costa might actually be the better. Like if Costa wins a wrestling match, that wouldn't surprise me. But I think it's going to be more him moving, landing kicks from the outside, maybe even winning some grappling exchanges. Give me Costa by decision.
We head next to the strawweight division and a matchup between Josefine Knutsson and Julia Polastri. Knutsson, the 28-year-old Swede, is 7-0 overall. She is 1-0 since joining the UFC out of season 7 of Dana White's Contender Series. She made her debut back in September against Marnik Man and took a unanimous decision. That was back at the Noche UFC card, Grasso versus Shevchenko 2. She'll look to make it 2-0, keep her professional record spotless at the expense of Polastri. 26-year-old Brazilian is 12-3 overall. This will be her UFC debut. She appeared on Dana White's Contender Series back on season 5, where she lost to Jasmine Jasudavicius. She got a second booking on the Contender Series this past September, where she choked out Patricia Lujas in the second round. Odds here pretty heavily favor the Swede. She is minus 225. Polastri plus 180 coming back. Julia Polastri is, I think she's an interesting prospect. Like, she has some good skills. She's surprisingly athletic. Her problem is that she's kind of tiny for the division. And that's what made Jasmine Jasudavicius just an absolutely wretched matchup for her a couple years ago, because it was at flyweight, and Jasudavicius is about as big as a flyweight can be while making a healthy weight cut. And Jasudavicius is a pedigreed wrestler with an amateur background, where Polastri, I don't have a full insight into her background, but she seems to me like an all-around fighter who has learned to wrestle well just through practice and natural inclination. So yeah, Jasudavicius just completely mauled her. The Alujas fight was a little better look into Polastri's skills for me. I like her, like well-rounded fighter, athletic, and like, it feels like a lot of fighters we talked about recently. I think she's just going to come up against a ceiling against bigger women in the weight class who can kind of bully her around. It doesn't work out well if you work best as the bully and you're like a 5'2" strawweight that's not built like Jessica Andrade. But that's what Polastri is. And while Knutsson is not, I mean, she's not Jessica Andrade. She is a powerfully built little strawweight.
She's thick.
I don't think she's 7-0. Feel free to play this back at me if 5 years from now she's 17-0 and she's the champ. I don't think it's going to last. I think she just hasn't run into the right fighter yet. The people she was beating, in Europe and the Middle East were low level. The woman she beat on the Contender Series was low level, and Marnik Man. I mean, Marnik Man and Puja Tomar, like one of them could get on the other's shoulders And I think Portia
And get to
Baines could
show
still
what's
dunk
his
on
waist.
Portia Baines could still dunk on him. Like here, I like this matchup. Again, I like both these fighters, and I think they're both UFC material, even if I don't think either is probably a future contender. But I think Knutsson's going to be sharper on the feet. I think she's actually, I think she's a better wrestler and grappler, or if she isn't in terms of straight skills, like the edge she's going to have in size is going to be an equalizer. Give me Knutsson to win by decision here in a really fun fight.
Yeah, this is an intriguing fight. I kind of like both fighters. For fairly new people coming in. I mean, obviously Polastri's debut, Knutsson's second fight in the UFC. I think they both could be, could have long careers in the UFC. I don't want to say like top 15 fighters, but it's not out of the realm of possibility for these two. Knutsson, she's a Muay Thai striker who's a counter striker, fights behind a high guard defense. She does really well to draw her attacks with feints well. I like her check left hook. You look at it, she's ripped. She hits hard. She does load up a lot, which could be an issue, especially if Polastri just overwhelms her with volume. I like her kicking game. I mean, her push kicks, she throws up really fast high kicks. She's very physically strong. She uses her strength in the clinch well to grind her opponents. Look for takedowns there, body lock takedowns. Got some mean ground and pound. She does need to improve her own takedown defense, and she's not a submission threat. Those are some things we need some improvement. Plus, she's only 26, so I like that. Her striking is, I don't know. She's very relaxed on the feet. She marches forward. She has really good output. She's a pocket boxer. She'll just get in there, kind of touch in, and then when she gets her opening, she really unloads big shots, and she hits hard. She attacks the body. She's really good body work in her last fight. Good kicking game, teep kicks, mean calf kicks. But there's a lot of things defensively I don't like. She's a stationary target who kind of stands directly in front of her opponent. She drops her hand, especially her left hand. She drops it a lot, kind of easier to counter when she attacks because she's kind of like doesn't bring it back. She kind of like chambers it back, or kind of like like a conveyor belt, like it goes down and back up and then down. She pulls her head straight back, or she tries to roll with punches, and so she kind of eats a lot of punches. She will sneak in a takedown. I mean, that's how she won on the Contender Series. Got good control, good ground pound. She has 3 subs. This is an intriguing fight because I think they're both really good, solid action fighters. I was surprised when you said the line. I thought it should have been closer. I flip-flopped a little bit because of the output of Polastri's. Like she has defensive issues, but she has really good output. But Knutsson's stronger, probably like a cleaner. I think she's actually could add in a few takedowns herself. Give me Knutsson. I'll say it's close. I'll say she wins by split decision.
Next up on the UFC Vegas 93 prelims is a featherweight matchup between Jeka Saragih and Westin Wilson. Saragih, the 29-year-old Indonesian, is 14-3 overall. He is 1-1 since joining the UFC as the runner-up of the first season of Road to UFC. He lost to Anshul Jubli in the final at UFC Fight Night Lewis versus Spivak last February, then came back last November and knocked out Lucas Alexander in the first round to even up his UFC record. He will look to make it 2 in a row at the expense of Wilson, who is still looking for his first win in the octagon. The 35-year-old Utah by way of South Carolina is 16-9 overall. He is 0-2 since joining the UFC on short notice last summer. He stepped up and fought Joanderson Brito, got knocked out in the first round, came back this January at UFC Fight Night, Walker versus Ankalaev 2, and got knocked out in the first round by John Silva. So still looking for his first win. Probably would be a moral victory, at least to get out of the first round. He's not favored to do so. Saragih, another big favorite on this card. He's minus 325 or so. Wilson plus 250 coming back. Keith, as mentioned off the top, there are some rough matchups on this card. There are some people that are probably only on the card because they did the UFC a favor within the last 12 to 18 months and are quote unquote owed fights. The UFC is doing the right thing by them by giving them, at least 3 or 4 chances for a victory. Wilson falls definitely into that category. The jury is out on whether letting him fight Saragih is doing him a favor or not. Tell me who you think wins this fight and how you think it goes.
Yeah. The thing is, imagine being Wilson and just towering over Saragih. Like, he's much bigger than the guy and still being such a massive underdog. I mean, Saragih is wicked undersized. He's a counter striker he fights behind a high guard. He does keep his chin too high for my liking. He attacks with combinations. He throws a lot of power shots. He does have serious power in his hands. I give him that. But he tends to load up on every shot. I've said it before. He's almost knocked himself over trying to land a power shot and trying to reach Wilson's chin at 6'1", might be even harder for him. So he kind of leaves himself open to counters, and he's very hittable. He'll throw out some spinning attacks for no reason at all, but he's got mean body kicks. I give him that. He is open to calf kicks due to him standing up so high. He isn't a wrestler, but he'll sneak in a takedown here and there, and he's got 4 subs if he gets the fight to the ground. Wilson, I mean, this dude there's no way to say it. This dude isn't UFC level. I mean, he hangs out with Stephen Thompson, so he's probably like a super good dude, but like, what are we doing? Like I doubt suddenly at 35 years old he's going to be so improved. I mean, I said it before, the guy looks like he should own like a solar panels company or something. The dude is a tomato can. He's a southpaw. He's fairly, he moves fairly well. He has this karate style. He hangs his hands low, very, very similar to Stephen Thompson. The issue is he's slow. He's not the athlete that Thompson is. He'll throw out some spinning attacks, but you have to worry about his chin. I mean, the guy's eaten big shots already so far in the UFC. Joe Anderson Brito smashed him because he doesn't move his head at all. Gene Silva just like quickly knocked him out. He wants to get the fight to the ground, but he isn't a wrestler. And dude, this guy was a wrestler. He'd be on the JV team. He has 11 subs. I mean, it's really his only avenue of victory. If he can find a way to get the fight to the ground, maybe he can catch a submission. He subs off his back, but that got him absolutely blasted by Joe Anderson Brito for doing that. I mean, I don't mind taking upsets, but I'm not taking him. I like Saragih. He hits hard. Wilson is hittable. He lacks durability. Give me Saragih to knock out Wilson in the first round.
Yeah. You pretty much said it all. In fairness, Saragih he's definitely a step down in competition from Joe Anderson Brito, and he's probably even a little bit of a step down from John Silva, but he brings the same basic problem. He's going to be much faster than Wilson. He is a hard hitter, and he is an aggressive guy that's going to give himself every chance to put that power on Wilson's chin. If Wilson were a better athlete, he could have some sort of lifespan in the UFC. He could have turned into a kind of poor man's Julian Erosa, and he has the component skills. He's slow, and that kind of highlights and magnifies all of his defensive liabilities on the feet. He has a ton of submissions, but if you look back, a lot of them they're just submissions that aren't going to work on a UFC featherweight. They are snatching fast guillotines. In fact, locking up a guillotine might be the only thing he does fast. But just tall man guillotines on overmatched fighters, or earlier in his career, subs off his back, that would not work on any UFC featherweight. We just finished talking about, our last card, UFC Louisville, on how actually getting submissions off your back is almost a dead art in high level MMA these days. Westin Wilson's best chances of winning fights kind of died with that. I don't see any reason to pick something other than Jeka Saragih to get a first round knockout here. He's going to give himself every chance to, and I don't think Wilson's going to be able to stop it. We head now to the women's flyweight division for the debut of Carli Judice against Gabriella Fernandes. Judice, the 25-year-old Louisiana native, is 3-1 overall. She appeared on the Contender Series back in September, dropping a split decision to Ernesta Carrascaite. Despite losing that fight. She has ended up in the UFC, and she will be taking on Fernandes. 30-year-old Brazilian is 8-3 overall. She is 0-2 in the UFC. Joined early last year. She dropped a unanimous decision to Jasmine Jasudavicius in February, came back in June, and lost by unanimous decision to Teresa Bleda. Odds here do favor Fernandes to get that first UFC win. She is minus 250, Judice plus 210 coming back. I think this fight is definitely a case of timing. Fernandes is, she's 30 years old, even though, it's not like she has 25 fights or anything. She's 30 years old, and looking back at those of her regional fights that are available, like luckily she fought in LFA a lot, versus her fights in the UFC, she sort of feels to me like a bit of a finished product as a fighter. Having said that, she moved her training to the States since getting signed by the UFC. She's at MMA Masters now. She may pick up some new tricks there. But even though Fernandes is a greater than 2-1 favorite over Judice here, if one of these women is in the UFC 2 years from now, it's probably Judice. And if one of them's a contender at any point in the future, I'm leaning hard on it being Judice over Fernandes. Because unlike Fernandes, Judice is raw. She's super raw. She has 4 professional fights. Only the last one, the one she lost, was against any kind of decent fighter, and she didn't have a long amateur career either. There's been a certain amount of buzz around her. She's from Lafayette, which is, it's close enough to the border here to Texas that, yeah, like I've picked up some of the buzz about her and did even before her professional debut. And right now, I'll admit I don't see what it's about other than maybe potential. Maybe there are out of the cage reasons. She's a cute blonde with kind of a cool personality. So maybe people are banking on, okay, if she can learn to fight, there's stardom available. But right now she's well-rounded, but she's well-rounded in the sense of being okay everywhere. She is big for the division and has developed. She's gone from being kind of like a tall, willowy flyweight to being, kind of powerful and muscular. She's someone that, she's got the Manon Fior body type, just not the component skills yet. She's a decent kickboxer. She does throw good volume, throws in combination. She has some bad habits defensively that Keith will probably describe in much better detail than I will. She doesn't turn to the ground game unless she has to. Like, she's a surprisingly good wrestler and grappler, surprisingly good in scrambles, but it's never her plan A or her plan B. Like, she turns to that when she's forced to it. But I think that might be enough. Like, the thing that Fernandez's 2 fights in the UFC have in common is they ended up with the other woman sitting on her chest for about half the fight. Even like, just, Fernandes is another one who's kind of well-rounded, decent everywhere, but she's not as good of an athlete as Judice. I think Judice is going to be bigger. Between the two of these, there's definitely more of a chance that Judice has improved both athletically and in terms of skills since the last time we saw them. Jasudavicius and Bleda are people who wanted to grapple. I think Judice will be able to test her luck on the feet, but the safety valve is there. If she doesn't like what she's getting, if Fernandes puts together any sort of momentum on the feet, I think Judice can take her down. And this being women's flyweight, there's every chance that just collisions in the striking, random clinches will just turn into scrambles. And I favor Judice to come out on top of those, literally as well as figuratively. Give me Judice to win by decision here. And I just talked myself into a major upset. I had been leaning Fernandes kind of all week, but just I'm fresh off of watching tape, and I watched the tape of Fernandez's 2 losses to Jasudavicius and Bleda most recently, and I'm like, Judice can do that. So yeah, me Judice in a major upset here. I guess she's plus 210.
Yeah, I'm surprised that the line was this wide, especially based on Fernandez' first 2 UFC bouts. I will say this: I'm much higher on Fernandes striking than it seems like you are. I like her striking. I mean, she's southpaw. She's long and lengthy. I think she's a good kickboxer. I think she got quick hands. She's pretty accurate. I like the variety in her attacks. She can go high. She can go low. She cuts angles really well, so she's sidestepping a lot, kind of keeping herself off the center line. When this opening, she steps in. She has good power. I like how she mixes punches and kicks together really well. She's got a good kicking game, kind of kicks everywhere. Her clinch game is strong if she uses her size. I mean, she's a big woman. She can get in there. The problem is, I mean, she's a weak offensive wrestler, though she does have 2 subs on her career. The problem is she's a horrendous, like you mentioned, she's horrendously bad in her defensive wrestling. She's been taken out 7 times in her 2 UFC fights. Our last fight was really bad. I mean, like the first one she lost to who was it? Jazavicius, right?
Jazavicius, where
but Jazavicius is like really underrated.
Yeah.
Teresa Bleda, no. Judice, what I like about her, she's only 25 years old. So I like that. It is, we talked about on the opening how everybody gets a contract. I would say it's weird for her to get a UFC contract based that she lost the Contender Series matchup, but that fight was nuts and insanely output. It was super fun. That should be the exception to the rule instead of just being the rule, like where so many people get fights. She played the Bonner in the Forrest Griffin Stephan Bonner matchup, where it's like, yeah, she ended up losing, but fuck, that fight was fun. She's a long, lengthy fighter. She's a good athlete. They talked about her being a high level softball player. Me and Ben just talked off the air about softball for a long time, so I won't go down that line. But she's a southpaw, good striker.
But hey, if the thing doesn't pan out for your kid, I mean, I know she's a great pitcher, but
yeah, I don't see my daughter being a fighter one day. Maybe my son, not maybe my middle daughter.
Dude, given what you've told me about kind of her personality and how she approaches it, where she just seems very kind of calm and nonchalant about the ups and downs, she turn into like a Gegard Mousasi type. Just that's kind of like feels like they're about to fall asleep on the podium at the press conferences and just like, I
yeah, that's true. A lot like a God Masasi. Judice, so she's southpaw. I think her strike is good too. Insane output. She just touches until there's an opening. She's got a good jab. She attacks with combination. She loves to lead with her power left. Like she'll be in there and she'll be throwing the straight left a lot. Kind of as a leading punch. Huge kicking game. She got an incredible high kick KO on her record. I think it was her first or second fight of her career. Good step in knees. She hates being pressured, though. That's probably the difference against Carrie, or how you say her name?
Yeah.
Carrie Tate, who was pressuring her. She backs straight up. She can clinch. She battle in the clinch. You're higher on her grappling than I am. Like, I think she's okay at grappling. I like her output and I like her cardio. I mean, she didn't stop in her heart. I think it's a really fun matchup. It should be a lot of fun. Fernandes has finally got the opponent that's going to stand and bang with her instead of just looking to get the fight to the ground. I like bolt striking. If you're right, if Judice is smart, she tries to get the fight to the ground. I just don't think she's going to do that. I think she's going to stand and bang it out and have a war on her feet. And I think this is super, super close. I think Fernandes hits a little bit harder. And again, I think the line is way off. I think it could go either way based on the volume of Judice and then, of course, the grappling advantage. I'll say Fernandes wins the split decision.
All right. We once again have disagreements. Only 4 fights into the card, we've disagreed on 2 picks. This one, Keith is probably right. Men's flyweights are up next as Jimmy Flick takes on Nate Maness. Flick, the 33-year-old Oklahoman, is 17-7 overall. He is 2-2 since joining the UFC out of season 4 of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought most recently back in January at UFC 297, tapping out Malcolm Gordon with an arm triangle choke in the second round. He will look to make it 2 in a row, bring his UFC record above 500 at the expense of Maness. 32-year-old Kentucky native is 15-3 overall. He is 4-2 in the UFC. He's 1-1 at flyweight. He joined the UFC as a bantamweight, actually was doing fine, but after losing to Umar Nurmagomedov, decided that his best future lay in the division below. And since then, he has a quick submission loss to Tagir Ulanbekov and a quick knockout win over Mateus Mendonça. The most recent of those, the Mendonça fight, was at UFC Fight Night Dawson versus Green back in October. Odds here? Okay, Keith. Your favorite is minus 450. Your underdog is plus 325. Who are they?
Holy shit.
I mean, I was kind of joking. I figured it'd be off.
No, I'm not. I mean, I'm saying holy shit. Like, I know who the favorite is. Maness is the favorite, but negative 450 for Maness. Like, we made a joke, saying I don't know if Brad Katona would be a 7-1 favorite over Hasbulla. I don't know if Maness would be a favorite against Hasbulla. Like, this is named Maness. Like, he shouldn't be a negative 450 favorite. There wasn't that long ago where there was little buzz about Flick.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was a while ago and he retired in between, but yeah.
Okay, let me rephrase. It wasn't many fights ago. How about that?
Yeah, that's perfect. Now, I think Maness is only the third highest favorite on the card. We're going to have some fun further up.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm trying and we haven't got the no. I mean, Alex Garrett's gonna be a huge favorite.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Here's the thing. I may be a little higher on Nate Maness than you are, but I've said this about Jimmy Flick, and I'll say it every time he fights until he hits the cut list. He is the rebirth of Dustin Hazlett. Like, he is a not very athletic guy who either pulls off a great submission, sometimes an all-time great submission, or gets his clock cleaned. It's kind of an either or for him at the UFC level. Like, he was always going to get a lot of rope from the UFC because he made that debut and he flying triangled Cody Durden out of nowhere. And at the time, he was still in his 20s, and you and I were already covering these UFC cards at the time. We're like, well, how far could this guy go in the flyweight division? The answer was not very far, because once he ran, I mean, and I don't even think that would happen if he and Durden fought 10 times. I think Durden wins 8 of them, and the ones he wins are all by knockout. Yeah, like Flick, he's slow. He's super porous on the feet, like just super, super hittable. 125 pounds is a speed kills division, and speed has been killing Jimmy Flick. And worst of all, and most Dustin Hazlett-like of all, his wrestling is so bad that the only way he gets to flex his submission game is if, one, he takes his opponent completely by surprise like he did Durden, or his opponent makes a bad mistake like Malcolm Gordon did. And, Malcolm Gordon is a bit of an underachiever who makes tactical mistakes. Aside from that, it's kind of a shooting gallery on Jimmy Flick's face. And while I don't think Maness is a future top 10 guy at 125 or 135 pounds, I definitely trust him to go into the shooting gallery and find that chin. I mean, he's going to be bigger than Flick. Even though Flick seems kind of long and lanky, Maness is bigger, and he swings hard. He hits hard. He's not a dummy on the ground, and he's a decent wrestler. Like, again, he would have to make a huge mistake for Flick to get into a position to get off any offense against him. And the whole time that Flick is waiting for that mistake to happen or trying to force a mistake, Maness is just going to be busting him up. I don't think this goes very long. Give me Maness by first round knockout.
Dude, you know what? He's crazy. I was looking at Dustin Hazlett. That guy retired in 2010. He hasn't fought in 14 years.
And he's 38. He's 38. He retired at age 24, man.
That's crazy. According to Wikipedia, he's now a paramedic.
He is. He's an EMT. Yep. Somebody from Sherdog interviewed him a few years down the line. And you know what? I love this sport but I don't love it more than I love human life. And the thing is, he seemed happy, and you could tell that he barely follows the sport anymore. Like the person who interviewed him tried to draw him out about a few things. Like he turned into a casual. He turned into the guy that watches 4 or 5 pay-per-views a year. And aside from that, he's just he's riding in the ambulance. He's saving lives. That's beautiful. Say he was still in the UFC at age 38. He never would have made it to a title shot. Like, we saw his ceiling. How many knockout losses would he have? The world would be short one paramedic, and the UFC would have one more middling, welterweight contender. And I say this as a guy that put Dustin Hazlett in the Hall of fucking awesome. He was like the 4th guy in there. Yeah. Like, I love Hazlett, but go live your best life, dude. I'm so happy.
All right. Enough with your fucking Hallmark stories over here, dude. I want him in the cage getting punched in at freaking bare knuckle boxing. Like, what are we talking about? This people's lives. Freaking. I just imagine him like going, like some kid falls down and like breaks his arm, falling off his bike, and Dustin Hazlett showing up to pick him up, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I recognize that break. I did the same thing to Tamden McCrory when
Well, here, let me pop that big in for you." And he just bars it,
that's it. He pops it back in, but instead of like laying down, he like pulls guard when he does it for some reason. He's laying on the bottom of the back of the ambulance. Then that's pretty much Jimmy Flick's only chance of winning. It was like pulling guard or something. I think, like, can we do a trade? Can we send Jimmy Flick to become a paramedic and we'll get Dustin Hazlett back?
I take that trade.
Yeah, I would too. I feel like Flick should have stayed retired. I mean, the guy's looked god awful since returning, and I little wonder about motivation too. Did he just come back for paychecks? He's an unorthodox striker, and a lot of times when I say that, it's a compliment, but it's not in this case. His striking is so bad. I've compared it to like Tim Elliott style of throwing, like throws from weird angles. But if Tim Elliott had no striking skills, like that, he throws a lot of kicks, but he doesn't check leg kicks. I go back to like the Alessandro Costa fight where Costa just butchered his legs. He throws these weird shots to try to close the distance where he'll get to the clinch and grind the clinch. He will wrestle, but he isn't good at wrestling. He's not like this power through your hips guy. He has no setups on his takedowns. It gets worse and worse as the fight goes on. A lot of times he's just diving in at your hips. He has no setups. If he gets the fight to the ground, he's good at winning scrambles, and he's a big submission threat, and he chains submission attempts together well. He can go through like the whole gauntlet of submission attempts, but he'll rush attempts instead of setting it up. His best is probably the Von Flue choke, and he'll play BJJ on his back instead of trying to work back to his feet to get a position. Though he's actually one of these guys, if he's playing BJJ off his back, I don't mind it because that's really his only avenue of victory. The problem is like he's not like world, he's obviously very good jiu-jitsu, like, don't get me wrong, but I'm saying he's not Craig Jones. You know what I mean? If he gets the ground, it's over.
We never see real positional soundness from him. It's opportunistic, and it works on bad MMA fighters. Exactly.
The one thing Maness has going for him is he's big for the weight class. He's a guy that used to struggle with big bantamweight, so he's big. He's got good output. He marches forward. He tries forcing his opponents onto the back foot. He's a guy that he's willing to eat a shot to land a shot of his own. Some of that has to do. I don't know if he's willing to do it. I should change it. He does it because he lacks head movement. If he struggles to get his opponent back, that's not good for him. He wants to be the bully out there. He's got some pop, not much of a kicking game. Doesn't check leg kicks. He'll go for a takedown every once in a while, but he's definitely more of a grappler than a wrestler. If he's on top, which he'll be probably a good chance against Flick, he's got good ground and pound. His grappling's not too bad. He got some good back takes. He has 3 submission wins, though he was quickly subbed by Ulanbekov. I mean, both guys are backs against the wall. I could see. I mean, if you just want to sprinkle some, you want to just sprinkle something. I don't mind like a Flick by sub. Like if you're gonna bet Flick, you might as well throw the sub in there too. But it's got to be early. Every minute that goes by, I start to favor Maness more and more and more. As Flick starts fading, his wrestling starts getting grosser. He starts shooting without setup. And that's how I kind of think this happens. I think Maness avoids the early sub attempts. I think Flick really gasses, eats some shots, ground and pound. And I say Maness gets him out of there. I'll say he does in the second round. Maness by second round TKO.
We head now to the welterweight division for the second heaviest fight on the card, as Josh Quinlan and Adam Fugitt both look to pick up their second UFC win. Quinlan, the 31-year-old fighting out of Las Vegas, is 6-2 with 1 no contest. Overall, he is 1-2 since joining the UFC out of season 5 of Dana White's Contender Series. Incidentally, the 1 no contest on his record was him plastering Logan Urban on the Contender Series in about 45 seconds, then having it overturned due to a positive PED test. He lost the win. He kept the contract, but after knocking out Jason Witt in his UFC debut, he has back-to-back losses to Trey Waters and Danny Barlow. So he's looking to right the ship here. He will have to get past Fugitt to do it. 35-year-old fighting out of Oregon is 9-4 overall. He is also 1-2 in the UFC. He joined the UFC back in summer of 2022, stepping up on short notice to take on undefeated Ecuadorian kickboxing phenom Michael Morales. He got knocked out in the 3rd round. Since then, he fought twice last year, knocking out Yusaku Kinoshita and then getting tapped out by Mike Malott. The most recent of those, the Malott fight, was at UFC 289 last June. Odds are pretty close on this one. So I'll throw it out there for you. Your favorite is -120. Your underdog is even money, +100. Who are they?
I have no idea. Quinlan's a favorite.
You're correct. Quinlan is the favorite. It's I want to be careful about leveling accusations against people, but
don't do that. It's more fun. Just throw it out there.
Considering that Quinlan looked sensational on the Contender Series, then had that overturned due to PEDs, and since then, win or lose, he just hasn't looked quite the same physically. Like, it's a little case of where there's smoke, there's fire. I believe that a lot of top-level mixed martial artists are on some sort of performance enhancer. Like, they're just, they're playing chicken with the thresholds. The testing agencies are changing the thresholds. They're adding, and these are people that they're doing this for their living. They're looking for any competitive edge.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm not saying, oh, Quinlan's dirty. I'm just saying Quinlan is worse at cheating than some of the other people. But everything seems to indicate that he's one of the people that really was kind of dependent on whatever kind of juice he was on, because he just hasn't had the same speed, power, explosion since then. And he should be theoretically right in the middle of his prime for a welterweight. Like 31 is when most of the greatest welterweights in history really had their biggest achievements. Since now, I think they've been kind of laid bare. Like, he has good power. His doesn't have much durability. Because he seems a little slower, his defensive liabilities have just been magnified that much. Like, being fast and athletic can cover up a wealth of mistakes and bad habits. Look how long Anderson Silva got away with, like, dodging punches by bending at the waist until he couldn't, and Chris Weidman flatlined him. On steroids, I like Quinlan over Fugitt a lot. I like Fugitt's a fun fighter, but he's a regional level guy that was, again, another one of the ones that was fortunate enough to be Johnny on the spot when the UFC needed someone to fight Michael Morales on short notice. Taking on an undefeated knockout artist does and should get you some favors from the UFC, but they haven't been doing him that many favors, because Mike Malott isn't undefeated, but at the time he was undefeated in the UFC and he was on like a 10-fight winning streak and really just seemed to be a transformed fighter. I mean, one of these guys has got to win. And I'm actually leaning Fugitt in just the tiny upset, just because, again, win or lose, Quinlan hasn't looked great. Like, he knocked out Jason Witt in his debut, but Witt got knocked out a lot on his way out of the UFC. Like I think he washed out of the UFC like 2-4 or 2-5 or something, and just got knocked out bad a bunch of times. Here, give me Fugitt to probably just win 2 rounds out of 3. We'll probably get some pretty wild swinging on the feet. Both these guys are willing to wrestle. I don't see either guy having a huge advantage there. If someone does have the advantage, it's probably Quinlan. But even so, if this thing goes much past the first round, I trust Fugitt's durability and gas tank better. So give me Fugitt to probably lose the first round and win the last 2, keep his job, and we move on to the next fight.
Well, I'm a little disappointed in you, Ben, because you said you're going to, I don't want to throw out accusations, and then you throw out an accusation. Like, I thought for the listeners, we could really give them the accusation that we want to do, that I think it's time to give them the secret. Devin Tejada, a.k.a. Dev Goes Fishing.
Yeah.
He's the one who shot Tupac.
He did.
He did. He's from that area. He's from the West Coast, and he was a big Biggie guy, so he had to take out Tupac. So
like his old handle used to be Dev Goes Murderin', and he changed it.
So if Dev's official job for Sherdog is to get people's weights, Duffy's height. Yeah. Adam Duffy's job is to sneak in to people's hotel room to find out what medicine they're taking. So he could be like a secret agent. He can it could be like Watergate, sneak in late at night with flashlights and stuff. So he'd be proud of your son if that was his job, to break into people's apartments, right?
I would hope he'd do a better job than the Watergate burglars. I mean, there were a couple miniseries about those guys, and they were incredibly incompetent. But
that's what happens when you have Forrest Gump in the hotel across the street from you.
Yeah,
nothing gets by that guy.
No,
we're showing our age. You know what? We're not showing our age. If you've never seen Forrest Gump, go watch that freaking movie. Don't waste the next 2 hours watching this. Go watch that movie instead.
Go watch Forrest Gump.
That's one of the all-time best. As far as this fight, I mean, I'm glad the betting line was really close, because, I mean, how do you separate these guys? These guys this is the peak of their career. Like you talked about Fugitt being the right place at the right time. It reminds me of the guy at the bar that sees the pretty girl, and there's a whole bunch of guys, and we all keep looking over the pretty girl. And also, like, one guy goes up and starts talking to her, and next minute he's talking to her the rest of the night, and you're like, what the fuck, man? I'm better look at that guy. And he's like, yeah, but you know what? You sip on your beer, and he had the balls to sack up and go over there and talk to her. So good for him, That's kind of how I feel about, like, Fugitt. Like,
but in this scenario, the hot chick at the bar knocks you out really bad and gives you $12,000. Yeah.
Not all my analogies are perfect, but
yeah.
If Fugitt, he's a southpaw. He fights with a lot of pressure. He's constantly marching down his opponent with high volume. When there's an opening, he really unloads. He likes to go to the body a lot, which I like. He has plus power. He does drop his hands, so it makes him very hittable. He throws a lot of kicks. He likes teep kicks. He blends takedowns attempts with his striking well. Though he'll kind of reach and overextend. He's not your traditional, NCAA level wrestler. He's not the best wrestler, but he does have 3 subs. Quinlan, on the other hand, fights out of both stances, switches stance a lot, good footwork, a lot of L-stepping, quick hands, likes to stay on the outside and then kind of burst in the pocket and unload big shots. So he's like, stay back, and then suddenly spring in. He wants to move forward because he hates being forced on his back foot. He wants to be the one marching forward and pressuring back. So that's going to be interesting, this fight. I think a big sign will be who's forced back, who's bullying the other guy. Quinlan's tough. He can take a beating. Though, I mean, he fights behind a hard guard defense. He throws a lot of wing power shots, and he has some power. He throws a lot of hard calf kicks. Not much of an offensive wrestler, though he can get it down. I like his defensive wrestling. If the fight hits the ground, he does have 2 subs. The problem is, like I said, he's tough. He's been knocked out, in his last fight, and we'll see how he responds to that. But the reason why he was knocked out, to go back, he was getting beat up, and credit to him for trying to get a KO instead of losing a decision. He over pursued, trying to get a knockout, and he paid for it. And you got to, give a guy a lot of credit for that instead of just settling for a loss. I'm not high on either. Both aren't very good. I've flip-flopped. I have zero confidence in this pick, but we have a consensus underdog pick. I'm taking Fugitt, being that he's the one. I think he's going to be on pressing the action even more. I think he might even get a takedown. I really have no clue. I think it's going to be close, but I'll take Fugitt by split decision.
All right. Next up at UFC on ESPN 58, and as the card is constituted as of the beginning of fight week, at least, the top prelim is a men's flyweight matchup between Tagir Ulanbekov and Josh Van. Ulanbekov, the 32-year-old Dagestani, is 15-2 overall. He's 5-1 in the UFC. He's on a 2-fight winning streak since his controversial, or if not controversial, at least weird, loss to Tim Elliott a little over 2 years ago. Since then, he has submission wins over Nate Maness and Cody Durden. He will look to make it 3 in a row, make the UFC regret their decision to take him out of the headliner fight of this card, and perhaps establish himself as a contender sooner than later in the flyweight division at the expense of Van. 22-year-old Burmese fighter by way of Hiestand is 10-1 overall. He is 3-0 since joining the UFC as the outgoing Fury Fighting Championships flyweight king. He fought, he's already fought once this year. He took on Felipe Bunes at UFC Fight Night Ankalaev versus Walker 2 back in January, knocking him out late in the second round. Prior to that, he had decision wins over Kevin Borjas and Jalga Shumagulov. He will look to make it 4 in a row and continue his not completely quiet, but somewhat unheralded phenom ascension here. He is not favored to do so. Ulanbekov is a healthy favorite. He's minus 230, Van plus 190 coming back. Keith, like we said off the top, they took a sensational headliner and they made it into 2 sensational fights separately. Sure. This is one of them. There's a lot of divisional relevance here. There's a lot of new guard versus old guard. Who gets it done here? And as you mentioned, Ulanbekov is older in age than Van, but like he only has 5 UFC fights himself. I mean, who gets it done here, and what does the fight look like?
Yeah, this is a really good matchup. I would say out of every single fight on the card, this is the one I'm most intrigued by, including the main event, including the other the really good flyweight fight coming up. I like both guys. I mean, Ulanbekov, he's a really tough test for anybody. He's a long and lengthy fighter. He's a good athlete. He moves well. He's been looking better in each fight. He likes to press the action, good volume. I'd say he's pretty technically sound. He sets up his shots well with feints. He's accurate. He works behind a long jab, attacks with combination. He does well to cut angles when he's attacking, kind of not keep himself on the center line. He has power. I mean, he dropped Cody Durden in his last fight. The problem with him on the feet, and I know I sound like a broken record a lot, is his defense. He stands tall, his chin's high in the air. He's got a good, he throws good calf kicks, though he doesn't check leg kicks himself. I always go back to that Bruno Silva fight where Silva had a lot of success. Like, he basically gave Ulanbekov dead leg. And what I was most impressed by Ulanbekov is how mentally tough. I mean, that was a long time ago, but he dug deep in a fight where he was visibly hurt and still found a way to win. He's a really good wrestler. But I should say really good. He's a good, solid wrestler. But I've said in this past, I think his wrestling's a little overrated. I think because of he's from Russia, we instantly think like that the highest level of wrestling. I just don't think it is. He's got good inside trips, good bylocks. He loves that overhook, step over, leg dump, kind of like a fat man's, kind of like a lazy lateral without throwing him over the top. He's got good entries. He's shown some good takedown defense himself. If he gets taken down, he springs back to his feet pretty well. I don't think he's the best. This is probably where his wrestling is a little shaky me. I don't think he has the best top control. I mean, go back to the Tim Elliott fight. Tim Elliott, he'd take him down. Tim Elliott would just pop right back to his feet, and Ulanbekov really struggled to get him back down. Recently, though, I've seen a lot more stronger grappling, good back takes. He likes to backpack. He's got those long legs. He can body triangle. He's got 6 submission wins. He hit Nate Maness with a slick standing guillotine. He subbed Cody Durden in his last fight. That was probably his most impressive victory, in my opinion. Complete pull-out to post fight. If he's put on his back, I've seen him hit some sweeps. He showed good cardio. I mean, he pressed the action against Bruno Silva, Alan Nascimento. He matched the cardio of Tamelian, which is pretty ridiculous. So I said a lot of good things about Ulanbekov. I feel the same way about Josh Van. Van is only 22, so I love that. He's if you ask me which one of these guys more likely to hold the title, I'd go with Van, even though, Ulanbekov's faced the better guys and he's a bigger name, but Van's a good athlete. Now, he's a bit of a slow starter. He's lost the first round in 3 straight fights. That's really concerning. But he's a builder. By the third round, I mean, he's got really good volume. He's marching down his foe with pressure. He's a guy that he's better moving forward than trying to fight off his back foot. But he's a very good striker. He's got quick hands. He's technically sound. He sets up his shots well with feints. He's got a great jab. Nice zip on his shots, really good body work. Some of the best body punching I've seen in a fight recently. I mean, he beat up Kevin Borges with body shots. He beat up Felipe Boons with body shots. I like his teep kicks a lot. He throws a lot of kicks, but he will sometimes throw them naked, so he's open to counters from there. And he's also open to get taken down off those kicks because he doesn't set them up. I love his tip, and he's a very underrated wrestler himself. He's got good entries. He's got strong takedown defense. Even when taken down, he's been shown an ability to get right back to his feet. I mean, he showed that against Zhalgas Zhumagulov. If he's on top, he's got good ground and pound. He's got 2 submission wins. I've said a lot. Like, I'm almost treating this fight like it's the main event based on how much information I just gave on both guys. I think this is an amazing fight, and I think it's a shame that it's not at least the co-main event. Like, I don't know why the UFC constantly, it seems like they're starting to come around on the flyweights. It's starting to get them some, fight night main events, but there's nothing wrong with going straight main event, co-main event with the 2 best fights you have. Mm-hmm. 2 most relevant fights, and this one should at least be the co-main event.
Especially when guys that fought in those might end up fighting each other next.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I think the line should be much closer. To me, this is straight pick'em. I like both guys so much. I flip-flop a lot. I give Van the advantage on the feet, probably slightly. I have Ulanbekov the advantage on the ground, but not as big as many people expect him to have. I hate that Van loses the first round, because it puts him in such a tough spot, and now he kind of has to play catch-up, and he has to be perfect the last 2 rounds. He's got to win the second and third, obviously get a stop. But, generally speaking, especially at flyweight, win the last 2 rounds. I think he does. I think Ulanbekov is too hittable for me. I think Van works the body. I think he catches the chin. I think both guys have the moments. I think we have a back-and-forth fight where, it's going to scorecards. Neither guy is very confident. But I'm going to say Van pulls off the upset. Give me Van by split decision.
I love the breakdown there. It's not like I'm in on some big secret, especially now that Fury is on Fight Pass. But, Van being a local guy and kind of the new blood at Houston's oldest and, most fabled gym. I've been privy to his fights, like basically from the very beginning. His entire career has taken place since I've been at Sherdog and covering local events for Sherdog. So I've seen Van come along, and I was as high on him as anybody else coming up. I mean, is regional highlight reel unmatched, and he was beating some good people on the way up. Some of the people he beat on the way up, like people like Paris Moran, are people that I would have expected to be in the Contender Series by now or on the UFC's radar. Like, he's beaten some good people on the way up, and like a lot of fighters we talk about, it's probably actually to his benefit that he has a meaningless loss in like his 3rd professional fight, because when you don't have that O in the loss column, you get to sneak up on people.
Sure.
Like, undefeated fighters don't get to sneak up on anybody.
No.
But when it gives you the Alex Volkanovski like route to greatness, where nobody realizes what kind of resume you're putting together until you've won your first 6 or 7 UFC fights, and everyone's like, holy shit.
Sometimes that's not early. It also comes sometimes we have an early UFC loss. So they take like a Leon Edwards.
Yeah. Oh.
And then all of a sudden it's like, wait, Leon Edwards, you already put in your mind, like when his rise up, I always put in mind like he's not that good. And then all of a sudden it's like, dude, he won again. Oh my God, he looks better. He wins again. And it's like, holy shit, like he's the best in the world now.
Yeah. Like, wait, when did this
And
guy
I viewed
win
him as
straight
like a B
fights?
level.
Yeah.
I viewed him as like, okay, for UFC talent, like B's a ceiling. And it's like, no, like pound for pound, best fighter in the world is his ceiling. I'm not saying he is, but like it's possible.
He was in, like, he could have been in the discussion there for a minute. Yeah, that's.
He still could be. A couple more wins,
yeah.
he might be. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. What I like about Van is he's already adjusting to he already shedding the parts of his approach that were not going to work at the top level. And a lot of fighters, especially very young fighters who are used to blowing through people in 90 seconds, need to take an L in the UFC before they come to that realization. Some of them never do. But if you looked at Van, say 3 years ago here in Houston, you saw a lot more flying stuff, more spinning stuff, more really wild, heedless grappling, because he could just trust his athleticism and instincts to let him come out on top in those situations. I love that he got Zhalgas Zhumagulov in his very first UFC fight. Just the definition of kind of a tough nullifier who
and plus you're gonna beat him.
Yeah. Like your starter kit comes with a split decision win over Zhalgas Zhumagulov.
Yeah.
You know, you get two pair of trunks, a hoodie, and a split decision win over Zhalgas Zhumagulov when you join the UFC.
It's a toy of the Happy Meal. Like it's automatic. You get it.
Well, but the same kind of thing that took Michel Pereira how many fights to turn from a complete wild man to just a solid, dangerous kickboxer who will occasionally uncork crazy stuff. You think how many fights it took him to get there, and Van's there already. And you mentioned it already, so I don't have to really belabor the point. Van's an underrated wrestler. Like, he's super young. Like, if he had gone to college, he'd probably still be in college, but he's a good wrestler in high school, good wrestler for MMA, that for a long time kind of went underused, but now I think it's just underrated. Things about Ulanbekov, I agree that when you get a guy with a name like that, from a gym like that, with a haircut and beard like that, you're like, oh, he must be a top shelf wrestler. And he is a good wrestler. Like, that level of wrestling is part of your I come from Dagestan starter kit, like you're a B+ wrestler, like before you get out of elementary school, I think. But no, he's not Islam Makhachev. No, if you need to compare him to a Dagestani, like, he's much closer to like the Usman Nurmagomedov type, where he's a good aggressive kickboxer who has wrestling in his back pocket if he needs it. I agree with you that this line should have been closer. And the most concerning thing is that Van has turned into a fighter who gives away the first round. It's funny. Like, he went from a fighter who used to finish everybody in the first round on the regional scene to someone who kind of gives away the first round. Like, almost like he's overcompensated for his former extremely aggressive ways. If he can find a happy medium, I think he's going to turn into Burmese Manel Kopp, where, okay, maybe he's not the champ, but he's like turns into a perennial top 10, top 5 guy who can knock the shit out of anyone else in the top 5 or top 10 on any given night if he's on his game. I've been going back and forth on this one, but I'll be damned if you're going to pick a 2-1 underdog from Houston and I'm not on the train. I like it. I go into this knowing the Van's going to need to escape the first round without taking too much damage and then be perfect in rounds 2 and 3. Give me him to do just that. Van graduates, moves up to the next level, beats Tagir Ulanbekov by taking rounds 2 and 3. If he looks great in the first round, that'd be even better. But, we'll work with what we've got. The 6-fight main card of UFC on ESPN 58 begins with a men's bantamweight matchup between Brady Hiestand and Garrett Armfield. Hiestand, the 25-year-old Washington State native, is 7-2 overall. He is 2-1 since joining the UFC as the bantamweight runner-up of season 29 of The Ultimate Fighter. He lost a wildly entertaining fight to Ricky Tercios in the tough finale. Since then, he is 2-0 with wins over Fernie Garcia and Dana Batgari. That's the good news. The bad news is that after joining the UFC as one of the youngest fighters in that division or any other, he's kind of turned into a once-a-year fighter. The Dana fight was back in April of last year, so he's been on the shelf a little more than a year, but he's back. He's looking for his third straight win. He'll have to get through Armfield to do it. 27-year-old Missouri native. I think he's Kansas City. 10-3 overall. Also 2-1 in the UFC. Also dropped his debut and has been perfect ever since. He stepped up on short notice and got it basically paid forward at him as David Onama gave him a rude welcome to the UFC up a weight class, just as Onama himself had done a few years before. But since then, he has rewarded the UFC's decision to give him a chance, as he has knocked out Toshiomi Kazama and taken a decision win over Brad Katona in his next 2 appearances. The most recent of those, the Katona fight, was back in January at UFC 297. That certainly changed some people's perspective on him, mine at least, and he is back also looking for his third straight win in the UFC, and he is a moderate favorite to get it done. Armfield is minus 170. Hiestand plus 140 as your underdog. Keith, like all, AI drawing and painting programs online are kind of all the rage over the last year or two. If you pulled up one of those AIs and said, okay, give me a male bantamweight fighter from the Pacific Northwest and give me a male bantamweight fighter from the Midwest, like it would draw you Brady Hiestand and Garrett Armfield. Like Hiestand, kind of like this good-looking kid that looks like a decent college wrestler, and Armfield like this grizzled, scrappy, underratedly skilled, Midwest guy. They're right out of the testing.
Then you said, draw me a wrestler from the Midwest. They draw Drew Dober.
It draws Drew Dober, and that's when we know AI still isn't, it's not ready to take over the world yet. I'm going to flip this one to you. Like, who do you think wins this one? Were you ever high on Brady Hiestand as a prospect? And if so, are you still, win or lose?
He's only 25. So, it's still like wait and see. Like, I wouldn't, when I seen this guy, I was thinking like, oh my God, look at the talent of this guy.
He was barely 22 when he lost that tough finale to Tercius.
Yeah. So that, it's not like, oh my gosh, like signing this guy up. This guy's an incredible talent. But in the same sense, like this guy's nowhere near the finished product. So there's some things I like. He's a pressure striker. He can fight at both stances. He wants to march his opponent down into the pocket. He loves to brawl. He has good pop, and he hasn't even entered his power years. I like his kicking game. He likes that like dipping Robert Whitaker high kick. He loves body kicks with the open stance, while from the southpaw stance when his opponent's open. So the orthodox stance. He loves stepping knees. He's hittable though. Like I go back to the Freddie Garcia hurt him. He got clipped when he was in the southpaw stance against Becquerel. So those are concerning. He likes to wrestle. He's got fast entries. He's got a good reactionary double. He likes to drop on his opponent's hips when they try to counter his strike. So he'll throw, and then all of a sudden they start to open up, and then he drops down. That's effective because he can shoot without us, setting up his takedowns as well with his striking. When he's on top, he's got a good top game. I mean, I go back to like the Vince Murdoch fight. He kept him basically held him down the entire fight. Good ground and pound. I used to have in my notes about him gassing on the tough show against Josh Reddinghouse. Like he won, but he started gassing out. But his last fight, his cardio was a difference maker. So I think it's more of a strength. Armfield, I mean, I don't have a good read on Armfield. He's not a great athlete, but the dude's super tough, and he's a bit of an overachiever. He looked good against Brad Katona. He's got good output, quick hands, accurate, throws straight shots down the pipe. He sets up his shots well with feints. He attacks with combinations. He really steps into the shot. He's got some power. He's got 6 TKOs in his career. He likes to get to the pocket, throw it on there. He's not much of an offensive wrestler, though he can get a takedown here and there, but it's definitely not his strength. He's a weaker defensive wrestler. He's been taken down in the past, but like Katona struggled, to close the distance on him and take him down. He was moving a lot. When he's been taken down, he was quickly subbed by David Onama. This fight is interesting. You asked, did I have Hiestand as a good prospect? I think he has the higher upside of these two, but Armfield is a little underrated. Even though I was surprised by the betting line. Like if you told me one was almost a 2-1 favorite, I would have guessed Hiestand based on his name recognition, his tough success. But like Armfield is underrated. I think he's the more polished fighter too. Like I think he's more of a finished product. I'm going with the upset though. I'm still picking Hiestand. I think he presses the action at Armfield. I think his takedowns could win him really close rounds. I think this fight's could go back and forth, but give me Hiestand by split decision.
Yeah, I like the breakdown there. I was cautiously high on Hiestand coming out of Tough, but he was very much an unformed product and just seemed to be like potential. I believe I said on our recap after he lost to Tercios in the Tough finale, this is a fight that 2 years from now, 4 years from now, like Hiestand maybe wins. Just
yeah, I would take it for sure right now.
Like
already.
And the thing is, we just saw, Ricky Tercios just fought last night as of when we're speaking now. He creates chaos, like Adam Duffy says, he fights like a stuntman. Like if you're not ready to deal with that, you're going to lose the decision to Ricky Tercios. Hiestand wasn't ready at the time. It was a real fun fight, but if he were a little more composed on the feet, a little more positionally sound on the ground, and didn't turn it into a Ricky Tercios fight, he might have won. So I was cautiously high on him after that, and he's made the kind of improvements you would want to see a fighter make between age 22 and 25 since then. The only problem is that he's been injured frequently. Like the UFC keeps trying to book him, and he withdrawn from multiple fights with injuries, with like staff. When he's been in the cage, like getting a win over Fernie Garcia and then getting a win over Dana Batkari, that's the kind of steps you would like to see a bantamweight prospect make. You would just want those fights to be 3 or 4 months apart instead of 12 or 14 months apart. If he is the same guy that beat Dana, and has made any further improvements in his game, has continued to mature at all, I think this basically is a pick 'em fight, and I wouldn't at all be surprised to, see him pull the upset that you're calling for. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets it done on Saturday. I'm still leaning Armfield, and it may be like my mind just may be way off. It may be recency bias and MMA math, but just remembering Armfield really kind of neutralizing Brad Katona's wrestling back in January after what we just saw Brad Katona do on Saturday night, it kind of raises Garrett's or Armfield's stock in my mind. And he's another guy that he himself is only 27, and he's been busier than Hiestand. He's been improving from fight to fight. Like I thought he was a marginal prospect at best when he got slaughtered by Onama, but he's impressed me ever since then. I wouldn't be surprised if he's taken like another step forward in his developments. I like Armfield to win a decision here. I think most of this fight probably takes place on the feet. Like Hiestand definitely is ready to swing down with anybody. Give me Armfield to win, probably just by being a little more composed, a little more precise. If this does go to the ground, I think it's more up to Armfield than to Hiestand whether this goes to the ground or not. But if it does go to the ground, I lean to him having the slight advantage there as well. So give me Armfield to win in a real fun decision. Next up on the UFC Vegas 93 main card is another men's flyweight matchup. This one between Asu Almabaev and Jose Johnson. Almabaev, the 30-year-old from Kazakhstan, is 19-2 overall. He is 2-0 since joining the UFC a little under a year ago. He's on a 15-fight win streak overall. But in the UFC, he debuted last August, choked out Ode Osborne in the second round, came back at UFC 299 back in March, and took a unanimous decision over CJ Vergara. He'll look for his third UFC win in a row at the expense of Johnson. 29-year-old Michigan native is 16-8 overall. He is 1-1 in the UFC. He debuted, fell victim to a submission of the year contender from Damon Blackshear, one of the very rare twister submissions in UFC history. Came back in November and choked out Chad and Helliger in the third round. Despite his balanced results at bantamweight, he has decided that his best future lies in the 125-pound division. we'll talk about that more in a second, but he's dropping to 125 pounds to take on Almabaev, and he is a massive underdog. Almabaev, another one of the biggest favorites on the card. He is around minus 450. Johnson plus 300, plus 325 or so. Man, I don't know who got in Jose Johnson's ear and said, yo, I know you're already maybe the tallest bantamweight in the UFC. You're a 6 foot tall bantamweight who probably has to buy pants with like a 40-inch inseam, but yo, drop to 125 pounds. Whoever told Johnson that needs to be jailed, because again, I don't think Jose Johnson is a future top 10 guy at 125, 135, or 145. It's bananas. Like, he might make the weight. I mean, he is a skinny guy, and beyond just being skinny, like, he has skinny legs. He is the kind of John Jones-ish like physique. But why? You were doing okay at bantamweight. And it's not going to make a difference against Almabaev. Yeah, and it's not going to make a difference against Asu Almabaev. Hell, these two could fight at 135 pounds, and I'd favor Almabaev. Almabaev is I think he's a pretty sensational prospect. The only thing you can really nitpick with him is that he's already 30 years old. But because of that huge winning streak, I don't think he's going to have to, like, if he keeps winning fights, he's not going to get on that Bilal Muhammad, Leon Edwards track where he has to win 7 or 8 fights in a row in the UFC to get into title contention. That's not what flyweight looks like right now. He's well-rounded. He's athletic. He's not huge for the division, but kind of his speed, his aggression, his approach have made it not matter too much. Like, they don't really fight that similarly, but it's kind of how I feel about Ludovic Klein after seeing him win again last night. Yeah, he's a little shorter and more compact than most of the guys in the division, but his style just, for the most part, doesn't make it matter. Like, the division doesn't have many guys that can take advantage of it. He's a very good wrestler, good grappler. He excels in scrambles, but just even as a wrestler, he's good at getting people down, getting him down on the second effort if he needs to. He changes techniques pretty well, and he's good at moving straight from takedowns into like MMA advantageous positions. Like, he doesn't just kind of set up shop in guard when he takes someone down. Like, he's good at keeping these moving and trying to take the back or trying to move, straight to side control. I think it sounds dismissive to say Almabaev by whatever he wants, but that's kind of what it's like here. If they hang out on the feet, I think he can find Johnson's chin. He might need a step ladder, but Johnson has classic tall man striking deficiencies where, you say it a lot, like, keeps his chin up too high, tries to avoid punches by backing straight up. And I think tall fighters probably develop that habit because it works on the lower level pretty well, but against well-schooled strikers, it just doesn't. I think Almabaev can and maybe will knock Johnson out if they stay on the feet. Just, Johnson is an effective striker at a certain range, but he's dependent on his opponent to kind of concede that range. I don't think Almabaev is going to do that. And I think Almabaev can take this fight to the ground probably whenever he wants and really take advantage of Johnson there. Like, give me Almabaev by second round submission, and that's after a pretty dominant first round. I would guess he busts him up on the feet pretty good in the first round. In the second round, he takes him down, advances position quickly, and chokes him out.
Yeah, this is an intriguing fight. I talked earlier, like, ranking the fights, my favorite, my second. I'm going straight flyweight, the top 3 fights. Like, I'm way more into this fight than you are because of the size of Johnson going down to flyweight. Yeah, is it going to be a wise decision? Not for his body, it isn't wise, but for like contention in the division, he instantly, you're talking about a division that is half as shallow as bantamweight is.
Mhm.
I've liked Johnson. I like a lot of things he's done. Almabaev, though, this is a tough test right out the gate. I mean, you got a very athletic fighter that can fight with a lot of pressure. He throws hard shots, as you mentioned. He tosses out spinning attacks. A lot of his striking, though, it causes opponents to raise their defense so he can shoot underneath. And his wrestling is off the charts. Good top game, good top pressure, good attacking, like post arms, which keeps his opponents pinned to the canvas. Who were we talking about on the recap show? Saying somebody was wrapping around their waist, and I was saying, that's because of the Almabaev against Canada. No,
doing like the gut wrench.
Almabaev is the opposite. Like he's looking to get those post arms, grind him out, very Dagestan style. Advances his position well on the ground. Good back takes. He's got 9 subs on his record. So Johnson is, he's super long and lengthy. The one thing about him moving to flyweight, which again, I'm really worried about his cardio, his output. Can he make the weight? All that. I agree. If he does, what an advantage he has, because he was already super tall. Now you move it to flyweight, he's going to be so long. I think he's well rounded. I think he's a better overall fighter than a lot of people credit him. I think he's got good output. Again, does he have the same output at flyweight? He's explosive. Again, is he explosive? The fighters are a little bit faster now. He's a good striker. He's what I've seen him. He's blazing fast. He's accurate. I love his right hand. It's super clean. He's got good power. I like when he gets inside. He looks for elbows. Got a good big kicking game. Mean kicks to all areas of the body. He'll get in the clinch and use his size and look for trip takedowns. He can shoot for takedowns, but he's definitely not your explosive wrestler. He's a weaker defensive wrestler, but he's pretty good at keeping a scramble going. Stay off his back. If he's pinned against his back, what I like about him, because of his length, he starts looking for elbows and stuff his back, which usually is like a no-no for me. Like I want a guy to scramble up, but he's like the one guy because of that advantage. Like he can be in a closed guard, stretch his legs out and keep his opponent, struggling to hit him, and he can kind of land, Travis Brown type elbows. He's got 3 subs. He's got good output. I like Johnson a lot. Because of that size, I really think he could be a dark horse in the division. Not endorsing him moving down. Like obviously, I'm kind of hedging my bets and saying like wait and see approach. That said, I'm with you, man. I think this is a terrible stylistic matchup. Almabaev, I don't think Almabaev's going to stand and bang with him. I think he's going to take him right down, and I think he's going to do it over and over again. I think Johnson will toss him some sub attacks, probably make some moments be a little miserable for Almabaev as he's like on top with his head buried in Johnson's chest, and Johnson's kind of hitting him with elbows and stuff. But I think the majority of the fight is going to be Almabaev on top of him. I like the submission pick by you. I won't go second. I say he just wears him out and does it in the 3rd round. Give me Almabaev for 3rd round sub.
Next up on the UFC on ESPN 58 main card is a bantamweight matchup between Douglas Silva de Andrade and Miles Johns. De Andrade, the 38-year-old Brazilian, is 29-5 with 1 no contest overall. He is 7-5 since joining the UFC as a standout in the Jungle Fight organization. He won his last time out. It was a little over a year ago at UFC on ABC Rosenstrike versus Almeida, where he took a unanimous decision over Cody Stamann in a planned 140-pound catchweight bout. He is back at bantamweight and looking to make it 2 in a row against Johns. The 30-year-old Kansas native is 14-2 with 1 no contest overall. He is 5-2 with 1 no contest since joining the UFC out of season 3 of Dana White's Contender Series. He is on a 3-fight unbeaten streak consisting of a decision win over Vince Morales, a decision win over Dan Argueta that was overturned to a no contest when Johns tested positive for banned performance enhancer Turinabol, and a decision win over Cody Gibson in his most recent appearance back at UFC on ESPN, Jebus versus Namajunas back in March. So he's looking for his 2nd win in a row, his 4th straight win, or his 4th straight fight without a defeat. This fight is a straight pick'em, the only one on the card. Both men are out there around -110, -115, depending on which book you choose. This is an interesting one, man. I'm going to flip it to you for your pick first, but just something I want to get out like factually.
Okay.
I've already talked about PEDs earlier on this card, and I'm on record as I don't care about most of them because in reality, what you get when you allow some performance enhancers, it isn't a bunch of dudes that all look like William Knight. It's just fewer injury withdrawals and fewer weight misses. Like, take that IV, please. Just give me my fights. But John's had that win over Argueta overturned, and the NSAC changed the thresholds like literally like 3 weeks later, where that same test would have been legal.
Yeah.
It still goes down as a no contest, but you know, for me, effectively, I remember that fight, and John's looked about equally as good in his next fight. So it's not one of those cases where, okay, yeah, he was on the sauce, and without it, he's lost all his powers. And then, man, Douglas Silva de Andrade, he's not quite at the level yet, but he's one of those guys, those Brazilian guys that it feels like he's been 38 for 15 years. That's all I'm gonna say. Like it's hard to remember that he used to be young at one point, but yeah, man, tell me who you got in this one and how you think the fight goes.
Same age as Martina Del Rosa's daughter. It's crazy. This fight, man. Miles Johns has been so inactive, like he fights and he's been out with injuries and that. But somehow I still feel like we've broken down so many of his fights. And then same with Douglas Silva de Andrade. These guys are just they're not guys I was so excited going over the Ulanbekov Josh Van fight. This fight, I'm like, I mean, I feel like Johns, he's a short, compact wrestle boxer that throws a lot of feints, but doesn't throw enough actual strikes. I mean, I have to go back to like the Vince Morales fight. His output in that fight was really, really bad. But he's let his hands go. He works behind a good jab. He follows up with hard hooks and uppercuts, though he will load up on everything, trying to get that perfect landed punch. He does have that power, but he can overthrow his shots, leaving open to be countered. The issue for him is if someone has a speed advantage, if they move on him, they make it, moving targets hard for him to land those big shots. That's why he really struggled with the timing of Mario Batista a long time ago. Well, because of his build, he can throw some really hard kicks, but he doesn't check leg kicks. He's a good wrestler with some quick entries and good at winning scrambles. He's also very physically strong. He can grab a leg and launch his opponent. He abandoned his wrestling in the past where he went like 2 or 3 fights with just completely not wrestling, just kind of Dan Henderson looking for that big right hand. I like that in 3 straight fights, he's at least threatened with some takedowns. He's got to take down the three fights in a row. So to me, that just makes him, much wiser, much more difficult guy to plan for. He's on top. He's got good ground and pound. He defends takedowns and attacks with submissions. Like he'll go for guillotine bar strokes, which leaves him to lose position to weaker wrestlers, which is really surprising. And he's given up his back in the past. Like his loss against John Castaneda, and I think Castaneda is slightly underrated, I should say. But that sub loss to Castaneda was still like it's just a terrible luck. That was like a perfect example. I was talking about like losing position to weaker wrestlers, and he's gassed out in the past. Though to his credit, recently his cardio looked better. He looks like a better fighter recently. Douglas Silva de Andrade, he's 38, so as you mentioned, I'm worried about him falling off at any time. That said, he's looked pretty good recently. He's a short, compact fighter. He uses a lot of pressure, really good output. He hits hard. He gets in the pocket. He unloads big shots. He throws a lot of hard hooks. His left hook is really been such a great punch for him. It's almost like, somewhat legendary for him. He doesn't check leg kicks. He can wrestle, and he's got good top control, but he's not the best defensive wrestler. He also struggles to get back up. I always go back. Like, I just pointed out a really poor performance for Johns. I think not to the same level of poor performance. Like, he struggled to get head and brow off of him way back in the day. So he isn't a submission threat, though he does have good cardio. If Miles John, if Adam can tell me that Miles Johns, what he's taken, if we get Adam Duffy to get a quick report before I make my prediction, and if Miles Johns promised me that he would strictly make this a wrestling match, I would pick him. I think he'd spend the majority of the fight on top. The problem is, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think he's going to spend the majority of the time loading up, throwing haymakers. And because of that, I think Andrade's going to outpoint him with output. I was always a Miles Johns backer, and I've gotten off the bandwagon a while ago. he's starting to make, that trip is looking a little bit better recently. Like, might want to jump on the next stop. If he can get by Andrade, I might be back on him. I just don't think he's gonna. Andrade's a tricky guy. I say it's gonna be super close. I say Andrade wins the split decision.
I like the breakdown there, and you may already have an idea where I'm coming from on this one, but because you've actually made fun of me about this within the last year or so, but Miles Johns is one of those guys who, after the disintegration of Glory MMA and Fitness, went to Marathon MMA, and
there you go.
Obviously, that was arguably the hottest gym in the sport at the time they blew up.
Was he a Fortis guy, Miles Johns?
I assumed he was from Texas for a while because he came from Fortis. He was winning in LFA right up to the point the UFC signed him, but then he kind of went back to the Midwest, and he spent the last year of Glory MMA at Glory MMA. Okay. At the time, it was the hottest, it was probably the hottest gym in the sport. Turns out it was hot because, there was a fire in the basement, but he's one of the people that after that all shattered, ended up at Marathon, and all the people that ended up there have done better since. It just turns out that dude is a real good coach. Like Trey Ogden. Yeah. I think,
Trey Ogden's your boy. Trey Ogden's your boy.
He really is. It's not
I agree with you.
It's not like I just said, hey, woke up one morning, hey, Trey Ogden's going to become low-key one of my favorite fighters, but I enjoy his fights.
You're the president.
I'm president. I'm driving the train.
You're getting a tattoo of that guy on you.
But if there's a guy that could stop Miles Johns from getting wrestleritis, maybe it is that he ended up at Marathon, because and I think I've used this analogy before, but when wrestlers, especially compact muscular wrestlers, discover their overhand right or their southpaw, their overhand left, it's like in Happy Gilmore when Happy hits a hole in one on the par 4, and he's like, man, why don't I just do that every time? That's a lot easier than learning to putt.
Yeah.
You can tell those wrestlers who just are thinking of the 15 years they spent in wrestling rooms and how hard it is. And they're like, well, hell, why don't I just start knocking everybody out in the first round and not have to chain takedowns?
Yeah.
This is a dead even pick 'em for a reason, but I know what Douglas Silva de Andrade is going to do. So it really is more up to Miles Johns whether this is an advantageous or disadvantageous fight. And you put it perfectly. You said, if I knew for a fact that Johns was going to come out and lean on his wrestling, you'd favor him. And you know what? If he hadn't shown more wrestling in the Argueta and Gibson fights, you'd probably be hammering the Andrade pick. So it really is more up to Miles Johns what this fight looks like. I think I'm going to have the faith in him to lean on his best weapon. And there's also the other thing where, Douglas Silva de Andrade is going to turn 39 in a couple weeks. And he is one of those rugged, stone-faced little Brazilian dudes that has looked like he's been pushing 40 for the entire time he's been in the UFC. But he's going to start slowing down at some point. So going on the idea that he might be slowing down a little bit and that Johns has looked pretty good in terms of game plan and fight IQ in his last couple fights, I'm leaning Johns here. I think it's a really close fight either way, but give me Johns to win 2 rounds out of 3, and he definitely seals at least one of those rounds by taking de Andrade down, maybe because he's getting clocked on the feet, but takes de Andrade down, does work there, does enough work to do some damage, keep the fight from getting stood up. But give me Johns in a decision. Third from the top at UFC on ESPN 58 is a featherweight matchup between Timothy Kwamba and Lucas Almeida. Kwamba, the 25-year-old fighting out of Las Vegas, is 8-2 overall. He is 0-1 since joining the UFC out of season 7 of Dana White's Contender Series. He won on the Contender Series, was not immediately signed, but he was signed earlier this year, made his debut in February at UFC Fight Night Hermansson versus Pfeiffer, where he dropped a split decision to Balaji Oki. He's still looking for that first UFC win. To get it, he will have to get past Almeida. 33-year-old Brazilian is 14-3 overall. He is 1-2 since joining the UFC as a veteran of season 5 of the Contender Series. He actually lost on the Contender Series, dropped a decision to Daniel Zellhuber, went and won a single fight in a jungle fight, then got signed. Since then, he is 1-2 with a win over Mike Trezano and losses to Pat Sabatini and Andre Fili. The most recent of those, the Fili fight, was back in December at UFC 296. So Almeida, presumably in the last fight of his UFC deal, very possibly fighting for his job here. He is not favored to get it done. Kwamba is minus 180, Almeida plus 150. Thus far on this card, Keith has talked about the various jobs that we've given people. It's Devin Tejada's job to go from camp to camp and measure fighters' actual heights. Adam Duffy is now tasked with going and looking in the medicine cabinets in all the top gyms in the sport. If you're ever at Jackson Wink, please go look under the cage, make sure John Jones isn't there. But Keith is doing all this to draw attention away from the one who's really not doing their job, because Keith Shillan's job is to put UFC cards in bout order. He doesn't make the bookings. These are the 13 fights. He's supposed to put them in order. And he let a fight between an 0-1 and 1-2 guy in the UFC make it all the way to the feature fight of the night. Keith, you must answer for yourself, and you must answer by telling me who wins this fight.
Okay, so I have one or two answers. So the first answer was I was getting lazy, and after the first fight, and I just threw all the fights like in a hat and just started pulling them out, and that's how they got it. Or what else happened is, like, today I was playing soccer, like I was in the backyard, and I don't know anything about soccer. It's me and my son, and we're taking on all the girls in the neighborhood. So it's me and my 9-year-old son, and we're taking on my wife. My wife's playing. Like, we're not really playing, but my wife's playing. My middle child's playing. She's 13. And then the 3 little neighbor girls. One of them, the oldest one is, I think, 7, 8. And then it's like a 5-year-old, and then it's like legit like a 2-year-old. So we're playing around, and like every time, like, all right, I kicked the ball to 2-year-old, and I stand right in front of her with my legs extended completely out so she can kick the ball through my legs, and then she laughs and runs by me. That's kind of, I feel like this. Like, sometimes you just go, you know what, these guys ain't going anywhere. Give them a third from the top. Just let them kick the ball through your legs. So that's what I'm doing with this matchup. This freaking matchup. Like, all joking aside, what the fuck? Like, what are we doing? Almeida. Yeah, this should be the first fight of the night. Yeah, no. Wilson should be the first fight of the night. Westin Wilson should be but then it should be right after her. Oh, no, Jimmy Flick should. I don't know. Whatever. Okay, so maybe
it's a race. It's a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
But this card seriously should have been very easy to split into main card and prelims.
Yeah,
there are 6 very solid matchups on this card, and then 7 where it doesn't matter. Throw them anywhere.
Yeah, the Ulanbekov versus Van. Like, how do you look at that fight and go, that should set up this fight? Like, Almeida versus Kwamba. If I'm saying his name right, I apologize if I'm not. Almeida.
You better learn it, because he's going to get at least one more fight.
Yeah, especially if he gets. Yeah, he's going to get a bonus. On the main card. This fight might be fun. Like, so when we like bash placement, we're not saying it won't be entertaining.
No.
Almeida's a big guy. He's a minus athlete, though. He's pretty stiff on the feet. He does fight with a lot of pressure, and he's like this pressure counter striker. He likes to slip and rip. He avoids shots with L stepping and small side steps. When he counters, he throws a lot of shots. He'll throw combinations, but he keeps his chin high in the air. He's a really big target. He's not very fast. He likes to battle and clinch. Kind of use a Muay Thai clinch. He's above average wrestler. Isn't the strongest defensive wrestler. He does have 4 subs on his record, but I mean, he was quickly submitted by Pat Sabatini in their fight. Kwamba, what I like when he's only 25, and I give him a little bit of a pass in his UFC debut. I mean, he took the fight on 6 days' notice after just fighting the week before, and then he moved he would also fight up a weight class. So there's like a lot of things. Didn't have a camp to like study his opponent. So I'll give him a pass with that. There's some things I like about him on the feet. Like I think he's a pretty technically sound striker. I've said this a while when I say he's just as tight, basic boxing. I mean, that's a compliment. Like he doesn't try anything spectacular. He just, throws clean, straight shots, very tight, not a lot of tells. I like his right hand. He steps in his shot, so he draws some power. He's got a quick high kick. If he picked up the pace in his UFC debut, he might have won. I mean, he lost a split decision. I definitely think he deserved to lose, but he won the second round, and the third round was up there for the taking if he really stepped on the gas. He will wrestle a little bit, but he's not very good at it, and he doesn't have a sub on the record. I'm not that high on either, but I give Koma the edge on the feet. I give Alexander probably the edge on the ground, as he's probably the guy who will look for the wrestling. You got Koma getting an actual camp, fighting his actual weight class. I'm going to lean him slightly more. I think he picks up his output a little bit. He wins some of the striking exchanges. Give me Kwame by decision. Was he the favorite? I'm sorry.
He is the favorite. He's minus 180. Almeida's plus 150. I'm a little surprised by that. Like, I agree that Kwame has far more upside, far more potential, but he's a nearly 2-1 favorite. I think that's more of a referendum on what people think of Lucas Almeida than than Kwamba. But like Almeida has gotten thrashed by good fighters in his last couple of fights. Like Pat Sabatini is going to take down a lot of people in arm triangle choke him before all is said and done. And then I think you and I both think Andre Fili is a very underrated guy. At least I do. I think like the thing is Almeida is he's probably already peaked, and he's a tall, he is a big and tall featherweight. Like he's got a lot of muscle in his frame, especially for a 6-foot guy in that division, but he's kind of slow and awkward, surprisingly for such, a tall, lanky guy. He's a pretty good offensive wrestler. Man, this fight is blah. Like the best thing I can hope for out of this fight is that Kwamba gets a highlight reel finish and he turns into something in the next couple of years. Part of the reason that Kwamba got signed and fought in the UFC on like a week's notice. One, he lives and trains in Vegas, so that was easy. And two, he got a gnarly head kick knockout that kind of made the rounds on MMA social media. So he was a natural guy for the UFC to call. I think Kwamba's got enough to get past Almeida, but if I were a betting man, I wouldn't be hammering this line at almost 2-1. We just don't know enough about Kwamba. And the fighters that have made it look easy against Almeida are pretty damn good. I'm going to go with Kwamba here. And given Almeida's kind of defensive lapses on the feet, given that Kwamba should have a serious advantage in speed and probably an advantage in power despite being the smaller guy, I don't trust Almeida to be that durable. Give me Kwamba to get a TKO in round 3 after accumulating some damage, survives, advances, gets his first UFC win, and hey, we'll see what this turns into. Maybe a couple of years from now, when Kwamba's a top 10 lightweight, we'll realize that this is where it all, a top 10 featherweight, we'll realize that, this is where it all started. That brings us to the co-main event of UFC Vegas 93, a middleweight matchup between Ikram Aliskerov and Antonio Trocoli. Aliskerov, the 31-year-old Dagestani, is 15-1 overall. He is 2-0 in the UFC since joining out of season 6 of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought twice last year, knocking out Phil Hawes in the first round, and then coming back in October at UFC 294 and knocking out Warley Alves in the first round. He will try to keep at least the win streak, if not the streak of first round finishes, going against Trocoli, who steps in on short notice for Andre Muniz. Trocoli, 33-year-old Brazilian, is 12-3 with 1 no contest overall. This is his long delayed, I won't say long awaited, but at least long delayed debut. He fought on the Contender Series all the way back in season 3, back in 2019, beat Kenneth Berg, in the first round, had it overturned when he tested positive for a banned performance enhancer. He went back and won another fight in Brazil. The UFC did sign him and has tried to book him debut several times over the last 2 years. I mean, he hasn't fought since November of 2021. The UFC tried to book him a fight all the way back in 2022 against Ovin St. Preux. Trocoli withdrew. They tried to book him to fight Omar Sy just last month, and Trocoli again withdrew. One of them was because of visa issues. One of them was because of he got sick or injured. But the guy's been on the shelf for 2.5 years. He's the one who's withdrawn from all those fights. He steps in here. Keith, your favorite is minus 900. Your underdog is plus 600.
Yeah.
I know it's razor close.
Yeah. Is that Alcaraz?
Yeah.
Left hand or right hand?
That's the best line available. He's around minus 1200 if you're not careful which book you choose. We previewed Trocoli's fight against Omar Sy that never took place last month. I can't remember whether we previewed the OSP fight. I mean, that was over a year and a half ago at this point. I don't remember, but the scouting report is the scouting report is the same. Trocoli, I don't know if he is actually 6'5" as he's listed. We've been talking a lot recently about the unreliability of height measurements and tail of the tape, but he is definitely very tall. Like I wouldn't be shocked if he was 6'5", and I would be shocked if he were under 6'3". Like he's very tall, especially when you realize that he used to be like a welterweight. I remember him. I mean, I remember because I went back and watched it when we were getting ready to preview his fight. Him losing to Jacob Volkan and Diego Lima at 170 pounds, and he looked like a ridiculously tall welterweight. Since then, he's blown straight through middleweight and up to light heavyweight, where he didn't just fail his drug test after the Kenneth Berg fight. He failed it bad. And all he did was go down to Brazil and keep on juicing. I'm glad that he's ratcheting it back to 185 pounds where, he'll be big and that'll create certain matchup problems, but it won't be quite as ridiculous as he looked at 205 pounds, because you can see a little bit of it when you look at his Fight Finder photo underneath our faces. Like his entire body blew up except for his head. He's just got this tiny, like featherweight size head on this huge body.
Yeah. He's like every single high school girl at the reunion.
And the thing is, he's had some success in the last few years, but it's not by fixing the problems that had him losing in Legacy. He lost in Legacy because he got like completely washed in the wrestling by Jacob Volkman, despite the fact that Volkman was a career lightweight who was kind of at that I don't give a shit anymore end of his career and just went up to 170. Like Trocoli has won fights since then, but mostly just by moving up to less skilled divisions, fighting really bad competition in Brazil, and just being juiced out of his mind. Like he's not become a better fighter. I'm not going to say he's one of the UFC's worst signings in years. I won't use that superlative. I mean, we've got Westin Wilson on this card, but he's certainly one of the weirdest fighters for the UFC to continue to pursue for years and try to get into the cage. Like, how is this guy? I won't say the juice is worth the squeeze, since like juice kind of defines his game, but Aliskerov is going to shred this guy. Aliskerov's one career loss is to Khamzat Chimaev. Yeah. And he's looked amazing against everyone else. He was
doing well in that fight too. I
mean, it was quick, but he probably came closer to beating Chimaev than anybody else before Chimaev got to the UFC. He actually, but he has the full Dagestani skill set for, the higher weight classes. He is an outstanding wrestler who is much stronger and just much heavier on top than his size relative to the division would seem to indicate. He's a good tight striker with like lots of power, and I think he's pretty defensively sound. Somebody asked us on the live chat last night after UFC Louisville what we thought of Alaskarov as a prospect, and I said, well, before I favor him to win a title at 185 or 205, I want to see him against better opposition, and I want to see him in a 5-round fight. It's always a question whether he can maintain that kind of work rate. I don't know enough after seeing him lamp Phil Hawes and Morley Alves. Alves is shot, and Hawes, even at his best, has always been very, very chinny. Like, worse fighters than Phil Hawes have knocked him out many times. I'm not going to learn anything from the Trocoli fight. It's a shame we didn't get Alaskarov versus Andre Muniz. That would have been a worthy co-main event for this card, where, it had some borderline top 15 implications and would be a real good test for both men. This, in fairness, I don't know what Trocoli is going to look like physically. We haven't seen him in 2.5 years, but I'm willing to bet he's not going to look better. He's gone for 2.5 years, with injury after a bad PED failure, and he's going to be down a weight class. I don't expect him to look better. And even at his very best, Alaskarov was just going to walk through him. I'm normally uncomfortable with any fight that has a 10-1 favorite in MMA. Just, there's too much chaos. There's too much unpredictability. There's always the one lucky punch, but this is about as safe as I feel with one of those, short of getting caught by like a big haymaker or making a Magomed Ankalaev mistake and just diving into a Hail Mary submission in a fight he's dominating. Alaskarov doesn't have really any plausible routes to lose this. Give me Alaskarov by, I'm going to say, second round TKO, ground and pound, but after dominating pretty much every minute of the fight.
Yeah, dude, Alaskarov is a straight killer. I mean, I liked everything I've seen this guy. He's a great boxer who loves to close the distance and throw down in the pocket. Short, tight, hard shots. He's got a nice power jab, mean tight hooks, has serious power. I mean, he starts Phil Hawes. The biggest issue is his lack of head movement in his boxing. He's got a very good kicking game, teep kicks, though he doesn't check leg kicks. He'll throw, shows his athleticism by throwing out flying knees. He has a killer instinct. If he gets you hurt, he's going to put you out. He's a very good wrestler. Nice reactionary double. Gets on top, smothering. He's a submission threat. He has this like nasty Kimura that he hits on everybody. He's hard to take down. I mean, Chimaev was trying to take him down. Like Chimaev caught him, but Chimaev was trying to take him down, and he was stuffing takedowns with Chimaev, which says a lot. Trocoli, I mean, he's the complete opposite of a killer. The dude isn't very good, and he hasn't beat much competition. Like you mentioned him going up as high as he can. Like dude's 6'5". Like dude's big. That's about all he has going. He can fight out of both stances. Though I think he's best at southpaw. He tries to hand fight. He kind of uses his reach in that position well. His boxing isn't very good. He avoids shots by backing straight up. He's not very athletic. He loves to use his size well with stepping knees, which I like. He will try to wrestle a lot. He likes upper body takedowns. He likes some judo trips, some foot sweeps. But when he shoots from the outside, I mean, it isn't good. There's no setups. If he gets the fight to the ground, he's got pretty good back takes. He's got 5 submission wins. But this is a historic mismatch, as you mentioned. Like I knew the line was big. I was thinking like 600, but
Trocoli's 900 is the best you can find. Yeah.
Yeah, Trocoli's going to try to wrestle Alaskarov. The problem is Alaskarov is just better there. If Alaskarov ends up on top, I mean, he's gonna just stuff Trocoli, batter him with ground and pound. But I don't think he bothers. I think he keeps it on the feet, and that's where it's even worse. I see Alaskarov stuffing a takedown or two, and I think he starches him. Give me Alaskarov by first round knockout.
Okay, you know what the proportion of Trocoli's head to his body looks like? Like a transformer. It looks like Optimus Prime. Like especially not just the movies and the cartoons, but when you had the actual toys, because they had to fold from a car into a robot, the heads were always really tiny, and Optimus Prime was the worst because he was this like 18-wheeler. So he had this huge rectangular torso and shoulders, and then like this tiny little head on top. That's what Trocoli looks like, at least at 205 pounds. Optimus Prime.
Ready for a hot take? When I was a kid, I used to always choose He-Man over Transformers when I was a kid. He-Man was my thing.
I wear like fur underwear to this day. In all the guys, no matter what their torso looked like, they all had the same like animal skin underwear. Like with that, we come to the main event of UFC on ESPN 58, a men's flyweight matchup between Alex Perez and Tatsuro Taira. Perez, the 32-year-old Californian, is 25-8 overall. He is 7-4 since joining the UFC out of the first season of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought most recently in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 55 back in April, where he knocked out Matheus Nicolau, springing a pretty decent upset and snapping a 3-fight losing streak for himself, announcing that hasn't really gone anywhere, and maybe he still has some contention left in him. Especially impressive considering that he stepped up on short notice. I think it was just 6 or 7 weeks after his most recent loss, but he's going to try to build on the momentum of that and blunt the momentum of arguably the hottest prospect in the UFC right now in the form of Taira. 24-year-old from Okinawa is a perfect 15-0 as a professional. He's a perfect 5-0 in the UFC. This is his first fight of 2024, but he fought 3 times last year, tapping out Jesus Santos Aguilar, picking up a decision win over Edgar Jairez, and knocking out Carlos Hernandez in December at UFC Fight Night Song versus Gutierrez. Odds are fairly tight on this one, but Taira is your favorite. He's minus 170, Perez plus 140. Worth noting that Taira was supposed to fight about a month ago. He was supposed to fight Tim Elliott back in May. Elliott was forced to withdraw. Taira bumped to this card, and then we had the flyweight shuffle ahead of UFC 302 that we've already talked about a few times. Keith, I'm going to flip this one to you. I mean, all I'll say off the top is I like this matchup, man. We're going to learn some things. It actually will help push one man or the other in the right direction of the division. This is good matchmaking, man. Tell me what you think of the fight and who wins.
Yeah, I think it's a really good matchup, and I'm glad the line is really close. So I expected Taira to be a really big favorite. I figured he'd be like negative 270, close to 300. I like that they give him Perez, a guy that I've always thought is historically underrated. If he wins this matchup, I mean, talk about a turnaround of his career. Like suddenly he might be fighting for a title if he wins this matchup, or he's right there. Especially because, I mean, Pantoja is, he's fought everybody already because he was in the division such a long time. And I know he beat Perez too, but there's not many guys standing out there. The winner of this matchup could fight for the title. I mean, you really think about who do you have that's in line? It's like Mikhaev and Albazi, but Albazi is seriously injured, and who knows where that guy is.
And so Mikhaev's even younger than Taira.
Yeah. So, especially if Taira wins. And Perez is a little different because Perez already lost to Pantoja, but I mean, a hell of a story. Completely turned around his career. I mean, it would sound like not that long ago we'd be talking about this guy, fighting bare knuckle boxing instead. Obviously, it's a big if to beat Taira. Taira's the favorite. Perez is good, man. Perez is a big flyweight. He used to be extremely inactive, based on so many. I mean, you go to his the amount of fights that he's had to pull out of. It's insane. But suddenly he's making up for time. Like he's really active, and I love that. Because time's not on his side either. So he's a wrestler boxer with really good high output, pressure striking, constantly moving forward, taking the ground. He wants to be one pressing the action. That's why he hated the pressure from Pantoja in that fight. Pantoja went right at him, and the fight was over before Perez even knew it started. When he's let his hands go, he throws tight combinations. I like his straight right a lot. He's got good accuracy. I love his body work. He throws hard calf kicks. He's a really good wrestler. Fast entries, good top control, really good ground and pound. The issue is his sub defense. I mean, he was quickly subbed by Pantoja. He was subbed by Figueiredo in his title fight. So that's concerning. But he showed he's got power. I mean, he showed against Nikolai. He connects. He can put you out. Taira's a long, lengthy striker. Very fluid and controlled. Uses his length well to kind of pick apart from range. He's got fast hands. Throws straight strikes down the pipe. Really good power, really coming into his power too. He's got a big kicking game. He does keep his chin a little too high for my liking. the threat of his, he's a wizard on the ground. The threat of his takedowns really opens up shots for him on the feet. Like, they're worried about getting taken down, and then he lands some shots. If he gets the fight down, he's incredible top game, smother in top game. I love that he never rushes anything. He inches for position, slowly controlling. He's got slick back takes. He's got 7 subs on his record. Chains together submissions. You escape one, next minute he's on another one. This is a really fun scrap. I like both guys. Taira has more avenues for victory. He's got more weapons on the feet. He's obviously the bigger submission threat. That's something that Perez has been, a bit of his kryptonite. Perez has more power in his hands. He's the better wrestler. I think both guys have some really fun exchanges. I think both guys have moments. Taira's lack of defense gives me a lot of worry. And if we're being honest, this is a big step of competition for him. I like that the line is really close. I think it could be even closer. I really want to take Perez in an upset. But I'm going to lean Taira. He's at the age where he could still get better. If one guy blows out the other one, it's most likely Taira. Now, of course, Perez has that power, so he could. But Taira's at that age where if he continues to improve and continues to get better, he's going to be a scary guy. I'm going to say he's surprised that he actually gets the better exchanges. I think we have some really fun scrambles on the ground. I would say Taira wins a close decision. Give me Taira. I'll say he wins by split decision.
Yeah. As I said, I couldn't even restrain myself from saying it before I turned it to you for your pick. I love this matchup because, we're going to learn some things about both fighters. Taira, it may not happen, but we have the opportunity to see what he's going to look like in a 5-round fight. And if you're going to contend for a title at flyweight, you better get used to 5-round fights, because
I didn't mention that. That's a good point.
Yeah. Most of them go into the championship rounds. I will say this, of somebody that I've not seen have to do it, I am more confident that Taira will be great in 5-round fights than just about any up-and-coming prospect I can think of, because he's a good size for the division, but he doesn't look like a guy with a lethal weight cut. And as you mentioned, he's already kind of calm and measured, especially on the ground. And on the ground is, I think, where fighters are more likely to really gas themselves out by overexerting. And Taira already has that poise. So many times when dominant young prospects come up, they may not lose, but they will at least run into problems because of a lack of poise. They'll either gas themselves out or get themselves into trouble. I will look no further than the other hot young prospect in the division, Mokaev. Mokaev's a little too impatient on the ground. It's gotten him tired in fights. It's gotten him almost tapped out in fights. Taira already fights like a much more experienced fighter, which is pretty cool.
Let me ask you a question, and this is probably more for a recap, but who's a higher upside, Mokaev or Taira?
Probably Mokaev.
Yeah, I agree.
I like Mokaev is doing as well as he has, even though there are definite things I can point out that he could fix and be better.
Yeah.
And presumably he will, hopefully he will. And then, we're talking.
It's his athleticism for me.
That's exactly. Thank you. That's exactly it. It's 1A and 1B. Because again, if Mokaev and Taira are fighting for a title, or hell, have a title fight trilogy 5 years from now, nobody is surprised. But Taira is a good athlete, and Mokaev is an elite athlete, like one of the better ones we've seen in that division.
We'll talk more about this on the recap.
We'll talk more about it on the recap, unless Perez knocks Taira the hell out, and then
which could happen.
Which could happen. Taira has steamrolled everybody on the ground, but he has been hit on the feet. And he has not been hit on the feet yet by somebody who hits as hard as Alex Perez. CJ Vergara is a hard hitter. Carlos Fernandes is a hard hitter. Neither of them are Alex Perez.
He hasn't faced a wrestler as good as Perez either. I wonder
he hasn't either.
He can struggle to get Perez down. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll get more excited for this fight now.
I love that after being kind of inconsistent in the cage by the standards of a top 7 or top 8 guy, and being inconsistent in getting to the cage. Alex Perez is about to become, I'm pretty sure, the first UFC fighter to fight 3 times in 2024.
Which is crazy. Who would have guessed that in like January?
Who would have guessed that? If anything, I would have guessed that Alex Perez would be fighting back in Tachi by the middle of 2024, just because he lost, not because it was deserved, but just because, okay, he's lost 4 in a row and he's already fought all the top contenders. Let's cut him loose and sign 3 guys from the contender series. But no, I'm happy he's still in the UFC. But as a big flyweight, like a flyweight who does have a big weight cut, like he has struggled, visibly struggled to make the weight cut, and a guy who depends on wrestling and power punching, and is coming around for his 3rd fight in basically, I think, like 10 or 11 weeks. I am concerned about his durability if he has to dig deep late.
That's a good point.
That leads me to favor Taira as well. Like Perez has his routes to victory, but even if after the end of the first 3 rounds, Taira's down 2 rounds to 1, I'm feeling good about Taira, because it becomes more likely that he can either just take those last 2 rounds by avoiding Perez's slower and slower power shots, outlanding him on the feet. And it's more likely that the fight only goes to the ground when, where, and how Taira wants it, because Perez isn't going to be shooting like a bowling ball double leg on him in the 4th round. That's kind of what I foresee here. Give me Taira to win this one. He is probably going to lose a couple rounds on the way, maybe have a scare. Maybe he gets clocked and we see what it looks like when he's hurt. But give me Taira to get a submission in, I'm going to say, in the main event rounds. Give me a 4th round submission where Perez is already iffy, sub-defense, and instincts and scrambles are exacerbated by the fact that he's the more tired of the 2. So I'll take Taira by 4th round submission here, but Perez definitely has upset potential, and I'm really excited for this fight. And that is it. The Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC on ESPN 58. Perez versus Taira, also known as UFC Vegas 93. I have been Ben. He has been Keith. If this is your first time watching or listening to one of our previews, first of all, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. We do our best to bring you as deep an analysis as you'll find anywhere in this business, along with the occasional one-liners, asides, running jokes. Please do like, subscribe. It costs you nothing. It allows us to keep bringing you this content for free. Drop us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section. We'd love to hear your take on these fights. If you think we're dead wrong on any of these picks, you're probably right. Let us know. And if you're right and we're wrong, we will give you your flowers on the recap. Speaking of which, join us for the recap. We are live on the Sherdog YouTube page right after the main event. We'll talk about all 13 of these fights, from the headliner all the way down to the opener, talking about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. Talking about what's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers, and talking with you, because the live chat is open on the YouTube page that whole time. So we're taking your questions, your comments, and your hot takes in real time. We have a growing community of friends that hang out with us after the fights, and we would love for you to be part of it. Between now and then, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week, and by all means, enjoy these fights.
Man, I gotta go. Adam's checking my medicine cabinet right now.
Make your bed of fairy tales.